Recording in progress.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this meeting of the Central Nevada Regional Water Authority. Today is Friday, June 20th, 2025, and we are meeting in the Commission Chambers in Churchill County. Jeff, would you do the roll call, please?
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Ghetto?
I'm here.
Mr. Frey?
Present.
Commissioner Steninger?
Here on Zoom.
Commissioner Gale?
Yes, I'm here.
Commissioner Perez?
Here.
Ms. Bolin is unavailable today, so we'll mark her absent, excused. Mr. Wagonseller? Here. Commissioner Plaskett is also not available today, so we'll mark him excused. Mr. Etchegary? Mr. Gallagher? Commissioner Brooks? Commissioner Edgar?
Present.
Commissioner Price? Commissioner Roos? Mr. Nixon? Mr. Dean? Commissioner Strickland?
Present, thanks.
Chair Easley?
Yep.
Mr. Miller?
Present.
Commissioner Gottschalk?
Present.
Mr. Mancebo? Ms. Hudson? Commissioner Vogler?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gibson? Mr. Odgers? Cody? Okay. Yeah, let's get, we've got some alternates here. Mr. Tibbetts is unavailable today, so he's excused. Commissioner Hill? Commissioner Helming? Commissioner Robeson? Do you want to have guests introduce themselves too?
Yes, please. Any guests, would you please introduce yourselves? He doesn't have a microphone, but Alex Tanchek is sitting down at the end of the table, and he's with us this morning.
Laurel Saito with the Nature Conservancy.
Supervisor John Peters with Mono County, California.
And what was your last name?
Peters.
Peters, thank you.
Kathy Flanagan, Southern Nevada Water Authority.
Thank you, Kathy.
Chris Mahana, Churchill County.
Chris, I wondered where you were. Thank you.
Alexandra Lutz, Desert Research Institute.
Thank you. Is that it?
Paula Carson, White Pine County Commissioner.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Okay, terrific. She's not designated as an alternate, but would the White Pine County Commissioner be considered an alternate? No, she has to be appointed. Okay. All right. If you'll rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 2 on our agenda is public comment. This time is devoted to comments by the general public. We do not take action on any matter brought up under public comment until it is placed on an agenda for action. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, public comment is closed. We'll move to the approval of the agenda, item 3. Jeff, anything that we want to take out of sequence or delete?
No, there isn't anything that I recommend for taking out of sequence or deleting.
No, there's no emergency items?
And no emergency items.
Thanks, then the agenda will stand. Item 4 is the consent agenda. The backup for all of the consent items has been sent to you. Is there any member of the board who would like to have an item pulled from consent for discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Your mic's off.
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I will second.
There's a motion to approve consent by Commissioner Shayla Hudson, second by Commissioner Norm Frey. Questions concerning the motion? Any comments? Is there any opposition to the motion? With no opposition, the consent agenda is approved.
We don't need to take action on the approval of the agenda.
No, we don't. No, the agenda, it's not an action item. Item 5 is the approval of a written request for CNRWA to extend the period of service in its agreement with Nevada Authority Management, LLC, which, as everyone knows, is Jeff Fontaine, our executive director. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to offer on this? I would like to say that he's doing this with no increase in the contract amount. Is there a motion on this?
I would make a motion.
Can you do it on the record? Down at the bottom. Yeah, there you go.
It's green.
Yeah,
Roger Mancebo, I would like to make a motion to approve this item.
motion by Commissioner Mancebo. Is there a second?
I second it.
Second by, can you say that on the record?
Commissioner Perez?
Yes, just say it in the mic.
I second it. Commissioner Perez?
Okay, thank you. Second by Commissioner Perez. Are there any questions concerning the motion? Any comments? Any opposition to the motion? That motion passes, and thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate.
No parole
another
for
year.
you. Item 6 is the possible approval of an agreement with Sage Digital for maintenance and support of our website. Jeff, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for the last 5 or 6 years since we've had a website at CNRWA, we've had that website. It was initially developed and maintained by Nevada Central Media, which is a small media relations firm in Alamo, Nevada. Ben Rowley is the principal there. Ben has since expanded his business to primarily include digital news for rural Nevada. So I think Nevada Central Media now is the owner of not only the Lincoln County Record, but also the Ely Times and I think the Eureka Sentinel. And as a result, he is trying to focus more on local news and not so much the website business. And so he has basically, as I understand, basically turned his operations for hosting, website maintenance and development over to another organization that he is partnering with, but this new organization, which is called Sage Digital, will be actually doing the website maintenance, support, and also hosting, which is something that will be new and will save us some additional costs. But in any event, it is, this company's name is Sage Digital. I had a Zoom meeting with them a couple weeks ago to kind of go over the transition. But this should be a completely seamless change, the only difference being that we'll now have an agreement with this new company. They are based in Las Vegas, and the bills will be paid to them and invoices from them. So I would recommend approval.
Thank you. And the financial impact to CNRWA is $100 a month
So that's
for
what we're
hosting and maintenance.
that's what we're currently paying just
Yes.
for the maintenance, but we'll also now get the hosting as well.
Okay, that is terrific. I'll entertain, and this is, of course, included in our budget. I will entertain a motion to approve.
This is Chris Wagenseller. I make the motion.
Motion by Chris Wagenseller to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Frey. Questions concerning the motion? Any comments? Any opposition to this motion? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item 7 is a discussion and possible action regarding the CNRWA's groundwater monitoring program for this fiscal year. Unfortunately, we were all very sad to learn that Niall Pennington is retiring. So Jeff, why don't you walk us through what we think we're going to do?
Okay. As the chair has indicated, Niall Pennington, who has been doing CNRWA's groundwater monitoring program for the past 11 years, retired from the U.S. Geological Survey, and it's just done an amazing job. And we'll get into some of the details of his activities in a few minutes, but just want to thank Niall for all of his work and just his the information that he provides and the effort he puts in is really has been outstanding. But I just want to read you the quick email because he asked me to do this. He's unable to make the meeting today. So it said, "Good morning, Jeff. I hope all is well with you. This email is to inform you that as of June 30th, 2025, end of current contract period, I will be officially retired from consultant independent contractor for CNRWA. It has been 11 years and 35,000 miles later that I make this decision. I have been grateful through this period to be associated with the CNRWA and its board members and county commissioners. I also feel proud to advance the well network to its current high degree of efficiency and also the many benefits it has provided to so many entities hydrologically. At your convenience, you may pick up the well book from my house, yada, yada, yada." And then he also has offered to help with the transition. And then we talked quite a bit in our conversation about qualifications. And so what I want to do in this agenda item is to talk about what is involved and potentially what some options are. And again, as a reminder, this program is important. Through this program, the CNRWA collects water level managements from 51 wells and 12 groundwater basins in the central region, and to determine temporal trends, identify the occurrence and movement of groundwater, and help quantify subsurface flow between basins. These basins and these wells in particular were selected many years ago in conjunction with the U.S. Geological Survey and also the Nevada Division of Water Resources to fill gaps, because these are wells that up until that point, there was not any collection of data from. So it's really an important component, not only for CNRWA, but for the statewide groundwater monitoring program in general. All of the data, all of the reports are on the CNRWA website. It's got a separate page. And as I mentioned, for the last 11 years, Niall Pennington has been the contractor. And I think there was a contractor previous to Niall for a few years, Mr. Dragon, I think his name was. But Niall, picked it up and really developed it.
It was Dan Dragon.
Dan Dragon, thank you. So the monitoring program typically takes place in September. And for the past couple of years, the contract amount has been $12,000. That was bumped up from $10,000 from the previous 9 years. And in speaking with Niall and going back and looking at his work log and records, I got to tell you, it's amazing what he did. So first and foremost, keep this in mind. In the span of, basically 3 weeks in September, typically, and 4 separate trips from Carson City, which is where Niall lives, to the various groundwater basins throughout the central region, each of those annual trips was over 3,000 miles, probably half of which or more is not on pavement. And certainly a fair percentage of, or amount of the non-pavement roads are probably roads that you and I, most people would not even dare to travel on. But Niall has utilized his, looked like a specially outfitted Jeep with small wheelbase, with a spot locator, so we knew exactly where he was in these areas, and pretty remote areas far from cell phone service for sure, and probably most other types of services. And so first and foremost, if someone does replace Niall in this effort, or others replace Niall in this effort, they've got to have a pretty good understanding of survival skills in the desert, I guess, and good equipment and resources. And so we need to keep that in
And
mind.
good spare tires.
Yes, and a lot of spare tires and lots of fuel. That said, the actual well measurement itself is a process that isn't, I wouldn't say overly technical, but it's not something that you just go out there and expect to do right off the bat, because they're, number one, have to identify or locate the wells, which we have located on a map. But, just because they're on a map doesn't mean they're not buried under whatever, or have been destroyed or partially destroyed. But we have a pretty good idea of, at least Nile does, again, based on mapping where those wells are, and they're all accessible. In other words, they're not on private land. There's no permission needed to access those wells. A lot of them are old MX wells and things of that nature. And so, but once you get to the well, then you've got to find where the opening is. There may not be an opening. There may be something that you have to remove. There may be some other equipment on that well that would complicate dropping your tape into the casing, and then just making sure that you're accurate. I mean, there is a science to it, obviously, and we want to make sure this is why we do this program, is that we're capturing accurate groundwater levels so we can determine potential changes. And so, in thinking about how we move forward, I did reach out to at least one individual who I thought might be interested and who I think would definitely have the qualifications all around for this. They were flattered that I'd reached out to them, but weren't.
He's retired and he wants to stay retired.
Yeah, like many folks that have this kind of experience. And so we're at a point now where we're trying to figure out the best path forward, and a couple things I guess I would ask this board to consider. The first and foremost is, I don't think we can get this done for the $12,000 contract that we've had with Nile for the last several years, and I think at a minimum, we're probably going to need to increase that. And my best...
Jeff, that 12 includes his travel.
Oh, yeah, that includes
and
travel,
all expenses.
motels, travel. So there's Niles, and again, this is based on Niles' logistics, his trip planning from Carson City. He did 4 separate trips. One was like a day trip, 3 overnight trips, probably a total of 6 or 7 nights, in Tonopah, Ely, and then lots of mileage. And so his total contract was $12,000 to do that and monitor 51 wells. So at a minimum, I think we're probably going to need to look at least $15,000 for this contract, or contracts if we move in that direction. And then secondly, who we can reach out to or who might be interested in doing this type of work. Again, it's going to require special skills.
Although they could be trained, right?
They could be trained to do the monitoring, but again, being out, I mean, most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with what it's like out there in a lot of these remote locations. So that's really the issue. The other thing too is there are some initial costs just to even get into this. One, you've got to have a vehicle that is capable of getting out to these locations. 2, you're going to have, at least at this point, Nile was required to have liability insurance, and that's $1,000 a year. You need some equipment, and you're going to need a satellite spot locator and a subscription for that year. So just to get going, if you don't have, assuming you have a vehicle that's capable of reaching these locations, the other technical equipment, you're probably looking, and insurance, another $3,000 just to get started. So I think it's realistic that we're probably not going to get a full program implemented this September, just because we don't have a person or persons. We don't have enough time to get them up to speed, and if we did, find someone in the next month or two. But we do have probably, out of the 51 locations, I'm guessing about 12, where we really would benefit from having an annual, a measurement this year. The others, we could probably skip a year. We could skip all of them for a year, but I think there are several that we probably want to try to get some measurements from. Clayton Valley is probably a good example of where we want to continue to monitor groundwater levels, for example. So, couple things that I guess we can consider, at least at this point, is continue to search for that person or persons who's qualified to do this work and would want to do this work. 2, break it up into several different contracts, so maybe it's not as burdensome or as much work and travel for one single person. Another alternative would be to look at sort of basin by basin or sort of region by region measurements, and maybe there are utilities or other groups in locations throughout the central region that we could partner with. And we even kind of discussed the possibility of maybe partnering with university or, DRI or somebody else that might have some students that under supervision could go out and do some of this work. And so those are all ideas at this point, but I wanted to have a discussion about this. Number one, get feedback from the board about continuing the program first and foremost, and I certainly would recommend that we continue the program. 2, any ideas or recommendations out there about people we can reach out to see if they might be interested, or 3, other options that I just discussed about maybe not trying to do it under a single contract and use other sort of personnel or other ways to get these wells monitored. So,
Chair,
Commissioner Strickland.
have you guys reached out to John Klinke?
John's already working full-time for Nye County. Do you think he would have the time or the inclination?
I don't know, but since you brought it up, I would pursue him. He's ready to go.
It's only once a year, but it's 51 wells located all over the state.
Oh, it's crazy. I can't believe
Yeah.
what has happened in the past. It's amazing we can keep those wells monitored like that.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I have to add.
That is terrific. We will add his name to our little list. And would you like to reach out to him also, Deborah?
I certainly will.
And then you can just correspond directly with Jeff.
I'll get back with Jeff on this.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
good idea.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Anybody else, any ideas?
This is Alexandra Lutz with DRI. So Jeff, I'd love to chat with you about this some more. There's a lot of details that are probably more than we can talk about today, but a subset of wells or something, or, we've got some students, but I'm happy to have another conversation about this.
That would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner Perez?
Can everybody hear Commissioner Perez? Yeah.
Commissioner Perez, I kind of thought possibly I just asked Chris, would you be interested in doing that? And he kind of mentioned, well, is there a conflict because he's on the board?
Jeff and I talked about that. Your name came up when we were discussing this, and that's what we both wondered, if there was a conflict, because you would be paid by the board, but you're also a member of the board. So we would have to clear that up first, but your name absolutely came up for Clayton and Smoky Valleys.
Okay, yeah, I went out with Nile Measuring, and that's pretty straightforward.
Can everybody hear Chris?
It's on, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Nile does the technical analysis and his written reports, that's kind of beyond my ability.
So that's a great point, and I should have mentioned that as far as the scope of work. Once the well measurements are taken, their law, he puts together a spreadsheet and sort of, and he doesn't, his analysis is really quite frankly, limited to just what the trend has been in the previous years and just putting together some hydrographs. That's it. I mean, he may speculate as to what's causing fluctuations, for example, but as far as anything more detailed or, you know, more scientific than that, no, it's pretty straightforward.
It is pretty straightforward. He tended to, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but just collected the data, then compared it to data from last year, and if there was a marked fluctuation, he would determine what was causing that.
Yeah, really the purpose of the program, I don't know, at least in the 7.5 years or 8 years that I've been working with CNRWA, isn't so much to utilize the data in any way other than to have it available for things like where there might be an application for an appropriation in a basin that this board would be considering filing a protest against, and looking at that as a basis for the protest. I know it was used in Camiva Valley in the protest that we filed for the Aquatroc Interbasin Transfer Project. I think some of that work is also used in Clayton Valley. So it can be used by us, it can be used by others. It's data.
Yeah, I've seen it in EISs in Esmeralda County referring to CNRWA water monitoring.
Jeff, I know that the wells that we monitor, all 51 of them were selected in concert with USGS and DWR to fill gaps in their data. Now that we're looking for a new contractor, is it time to revisit those?
Great question. I think the answer is yes. I've spoken to Niall about this on several occasions in the past in the context of the possibility of an expansion, for example. A couple years ago, or maybe last year, a year and a half ago, I was in conversations with a lot of folks from the lithium mining industry in general, about the need for expanded monitoring data in certain basins, just to kind of get ahead of things. And I talked to Niall about that, and he went through the history of all of this. And honestly, after I got done with that meeting with Niall, I was convinced that the basis of this program and the foundation of this program is something that we don't want to mess around with too much. And the reason is that because it was developed in conjunction with USGS and DWR, I'm not sure that there's necessarily anything in writing, but this was done a couple decades ago at least.
Yeah, right.
And everybody agreed to all of this, and everybody agreed to allow these wells to be utilized for the monitoring program. And so I'm a little hesitant to say, let's go back and do something different, because I don't know that there's a lot of records related to this. And I'm not trying to hide anything. I'm just saying that it's been a successful program for many years. And we can certainly run it by the Division of Water Resources just to see if there are some other basins they might be interested in, or they're now covering some of these basins. But I don't know that I want to go back and sort of dismantle the program or do a completed audit on it, because I just think that we have a pretty good foundation, so.
And Jeff, I know that DWR doesn't collect groundwater pumping data from wells in any of those 12 basins, and I'm assuming that that is still true.
Well, and that's I think what we want to find out is this still valuable data for NDWR?
Yes.
Or is it duplicative? If it's duplicative, then we can have the conversation.
And, well, we're not going to know until we have the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll do that. I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I don't see any decision coming out of this morning yet. Maybe we need more information.
I would say the only thing is, at this point, I've got some pretty good ideas. If we're able to pull something together here, and in the next couple of months, we may need to have a special meeting because these wells need to be monitored before the monsoon season, at least in the southern part of the state, because then you can't access these well sites. So September seems to be the month to do this, or at least that's what Niall has been basing his trips on. And so we would have to have, the board approve a contract and a path forward and all that. But I guess what I'll do is after this meeting, I'll start working on a few things and getting some ideas about how we might be able to move forward. And I will reach out to NDWR to verify that these are still good.
Okay,
good
that's
locations.
great. And in the meantime, Commissioner Strickland will facilitate a discussion between you and John Klenke with Nye County, and you'll talk to Alexandra Lutz with DRI. Okay, terrific. Anybody, anything? No?
Yeah, I'm gonna throw this out there. I could potentially cover the wells in my area and monitor those,
That's exactly the kind of thing we were talking about.
because, well,
Yeah.
I'm a well driller, so I don't know what more qualifications you need, but.
Ooh,
and
Deborah, so are
I
you.
cover a lot of ground, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as taking them all on, yeah, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. But I would like to have a list of everything that's monitored now and get a good look at it.
Okay.
So I can
There's a bunch.
determine what I could, possibly get covered on an annual
Yeah.
basis, but
That'll be on our website, right?
It is, but I'll get a hold of you. I'll send you the information.
Your
I'll send you a
mic's
map.
off. Your mic's off.
I'll send you a map.
all right, thank you.
And you're White Pine, right?
Yes,
And we
ma'am.
have a bunch in White Pine. And Railroad Valley. I don't know how,
I grew up in that valley.
you did? Okay, terrific. All right. So we'll add Cody to your list. Trenton, sorry. Trent, okay, yeah. My apologies.
It's all right.
Anything else on this item? Chris, you look like you're going to say something. No? You're good? All right. We'll jump to item number 8. And this is an update on DRI's Rural County Water Resource Planning Initiative. Jeff?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So as most of you know, CNRWA has really been behind county water planning and was instrumental in getting SB 150 enacted in 2019 to require counties to develop water resource management plans, and been working with individual counties on, helping them update or get plans going, and have attempted to get funding for counties to help get some of that work done, primarily the technical work on the water resource management plans. And the Nevada Division of Water Resources set aside some, I think, ARPA funding for the Desert Research Institute to go ahead and do just that, which is to assist rural counties, and this is specifically for rural counties, to develop and update their water resource plans in compliance with the new statute that's been was enacted in 2019, and primarily working on the water inventories and some projections and some other technical components of the water resource management plan. And so DRI has a team that has been working on this and kicked this project off sometime earlier this year and had some meetings. But I'm going to turn it over to Alexandra Lutz, who is the director of the graduate program of hydrologic sciences for DRI, and she's kind of overseeing the program. And so Alexandra's on the Zoom, and so I'll turn it over to her.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff, and thank you to the entire board and the authority for the opportunity to provide an update today. So since we last presented, it was my colleague Dan Safner who had some slides with an overview of, as Jeff mentioned, we have a grant from the state that will go through the end of calendar year 2026, so December 2026, that pays a team of us here at DRI, about 12 folks, to provide help to the counties for rural water planning. And since the last update, just a little bit of where we're at, we have been getting on the agendas for county commissioners' meetings. One of the things that we do before we embark on water planning is get approval from the county commission to work with the county. So upcoming county commissioners' meetings will be Douglas, Pershing, and Nye. We're on the agendas, or will be submitting to be on the agendas for approval to work with those counties.
Alexandra, are you
Yes,
going to
please.
be on the agenda for those counties with their boards of county commissioners or with their water authorities?
With the boards of the county commissioners, that's the first stop.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for asking. Once there's been approval from the county at the county level to proceed, then, there's other meetings that would take place. We do have a memorandum of understanding that would take place after the county commissioners approve. And also we work on a timeline with the counties. So you had asked, some counties have water advisory boards, some don't, some have water planners, land use planners. So it varies from county to county, but once we have approval, we work with the folks who would be doing the water planning and the ones using the water plan to set up a timeline of how we would proceed. So we are working on that with Lyon, Lander, and Elko counties. So that's kind of the next step. Then once the MOU and a timeline has kind of been drafted out and sketched out, we'll start writing the plan. And we're doing that right now with Esmeralda County. So we do, and we have a sample plan. Esmeralda County has been graciously, has allowed us to share this sample plan. So anyone that's wanting to see what it might look like, examples of the figures and the maps and plots, just go ahead and get in touch with me. Jeff has my contact info. Please share my email, Jeff, widely, no problem there. And we can send the sample plan your way. We will update it as much as we can as time goes on. So right now, what you're looking at in the sample plan is just the beginning chapter. As time goes on, there will be more chapters of it. And let's see, I'll be back, either me or my colleague or one of us from our team will be back at the next meeting to provide another update. If there's any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to any of us. My email is pretty simple. It's Alex, ALEX, @dri.edu. So just shoot me an email, and if I can't answer your question, I will find someone who can. Okay, and I'm happy to answer any questions today if there are any from folks on Zoom or in the room.
Anybody in the room or on the phone, do you have any questions for Alexandra about this process? No? Anything you'd like to add, Alexandra?
No, thanks again.
You're good? Jeff?
Yeah.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, again, I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important it is for CNRWA and all rural counties to have an updated water resource management plan. Not only is it a requirement of law, although the law is somewhat vague in terms of this, the specifics of what's needed, other than you've got to have an inventory of your legally and, technically or logistically available water resources, and whether or not those water resources are going to serve your future population or projected demand. So are they sustainable? And it's really about protecting your county's water resources, which is what this organization is all about. And so to have this opportunity to have DRI, work with DRI to have a really solid foundation for your plan, I think is just great. And I hope that every CNRWA member county will take advantage of the opportunity.
Well said, and I agree. Item number 9 on our agenda is a presentation by Churchill County Commissioner Miles Ghetto, and the presentation involves cultivating crops and future generations in the Nevada frontier. And I will turn the floor over to him.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like
you.
she said, my name is Miles Ghetto. I'm a fourth-generation farmer here in Fallon, Nevada, on top of being the chair for Churchill County Commissioners. Just a little preface on this presentation, I guess, is that it's I have it different on my phone than what's up there. Somehow in moving it between slides and Google Slides and PDF, it switched it up a little bit. So this presentation is split into two parts. It's mainly about conserving water and what farmers here in the valley can do to conserve water. The majority of this information is kind of pertinent to Fallon, and as you all know, we flood irrigate here. So it's what Fallon farmers do and other, Lovelock communities do as well, and flood irrigation communities do. So the first part of this presentation is about using water-conscious crops, whether that be teff, okra, chia, fonio. There's a lot of different water-conscious crops out there that farmers can use that use less water. Generally speaking, this one's mainly, again, about teff, just because that's what my family's doing, or the majority of what we're doing is teff.
And Miles, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go
For
ahead.
those in the room and on the phone who don't know what teff is, can you please explain that?
Yes, of course. So teff's an ancient grain. It's a gluten-free heritage grain. So the majority of what my family does, we have a cleaning facility here in town. It all goes to the baking industry. So it gets ground down into flour and shipped out to be put into breads, pastas, stuff like that. So again, it's an ancient grass is basically what it comes down to. It's very, very small. So if you think about wheat berries or wheat kernels, there's about 44,000 wheat berries in 1 pound. Teff has 1.3 million seeds per pound. So it basically looks like sand. And just as a little fun side note, I guess, teff in Ethiopian actually means lost. So if you drop it on the ground, it's gone forever. You're never finding it again. So that's where it gets its name from. So this first slide's just kind of about some teff production in Ethiopia. So it's the primary staple crop in Ethiopia. They use it for injera, which is like a flatbread. Sourdough flatbread is how I always describe it. It's really good in my opinion. It counts for about 24% of their agricultural land in Ethiopia. And that equates to about 7.4 million acres. So it's again, very substantial crop in Ethiopia. Everything's done by hand, whether it be sowing, harvesting, threshing the seed, bagging the seed, everything is done by hand. As you can see in Ethiopia, on that bottom right picture, they take cattle, they'll cut it up in the field like you see in the top picture, and then they'll lay it into a mud and cow dung earthen pit, and then they'll take those cows, they'll tie their mouths shut, and then they'll walk the cows over the grain to knock the grain out of the actual pieces. And then they put it up the straw in those piles. They build their houses with the straw. That's the leftover material, not the grain, but the straw. They'll build their houses with mud and teff straw for stability and support. Next slide, Pam. Thank you. So teff production in the United States, between 2,000 and 5,000 acres get grown for grain production in the United States. It's primarily split between Nevada and Idaho. There is some grown in Arizona as well as Southern California. Teff is extremely limited on where it can grow when you're growing it for grain. It has to be hot, it has to be dry, and it has to be high elevation. So if you move anywhere too high and you get too much moisture, it'll mold. And most of the time it doesn't get hot enough in higher elevations. So it's extremely limited on where it can grow. The average yield for teff grain is about 1,300 to 1,500 pounds. For teff forage, this is in another slide, but for about 4 tons for teff forage. And again, that's another good aspect about teff is that it's versatile. You can grow it for forage or you can grow it for grain. So if you get in late, that's fine. You can still harvest it for forage and bale it and ship it off to the horse industry. Teff hay is very, very good because it doesn't have a lot of sugar, doesn't have a lot of protein, doesn't have a lot of energy, basically. It keeps an animal at the same weight, but it doesn't make an animal fat. So it's mainly, you see a lot of teff go to like racetracks for racehorses. They don't want those animals being too large, too fat. They want them lean, lean machines, basically. And so that's what teff's good at. In the United States, all the machinery is modern, obviously. So the tractors, swathers, combines, seed cleaners, very, very little handwork is actually done. And that bottom little piece is just something that our company prides us on, is that, growing in the United States, it creates an unrivaled product. Again, when you're thinking about the cows, kind of gross, but there's what's there to catch when they go to the bathroom. Number one, or number two, there's nothing in those pits. And that's just, third world country life. But in the United States, we have a clean, unrivaled product. So Desert Oasis Teff and Grain is the name of our company. My dad started in 2004. I was just 4 years old, so I grew up with teff. Planting begins around mid-May, June. We plant 2 pounds an acre per year and 5 to 8 pounds for grain production. Irrigations, it takes about 5 to 7 irrigations, and it's drought resistant. We'll get to that in a couple slides. Next slide, Pam. So some of the good water conservation aspects of teff is it's drought tolerant. I've got a demonstration slide on the next one as well. It can tolerate long durations of time without water. The only thing you lose is plant growth, or that time in between when it's shriveled up and dead, which you'll see in the next slide. It takes approximately 33 to 50% less water than traditional crops. That'd be wheat, corn, alfalfa. And it takes less irrigations in general. For hay, it takes roughly 5 irrigations to get a hay crop, and for grain, it takes between 6 and 7. And like I said earlier, teff hay yields between about 4 tons per acre to 5 tons per acre on hay, and about 1,500 pounds an acre on average for grain, and can also tolerate poor water qualities as well as poor soil qualities. And so this is a really big aspect of teff, and again, you have so many little seeds in a pound, is that, a little seed goes a long way. And so we sell a lot of seed for planting seed, whether it be to the Midwest when they have blowouts and droughts and fires and stuff like that. But it's a great nurse crop, cover crop, catch crop, and other, smothering crops for weed pressure and stuff like that. Again, if it's hot enough, it's very fast growing. So it just takes off and chokes out all the other weeds. And it takes less soil preparation. So you don't have to disc, you don't have to plow, you don't have to laser level since we're on flood irrigation. You don't have to you can spray that seed out on a field, irrigate it, and it'll come up. So this is that slide that I was talking about showing the drought resistant.
Miles, I'm sorry, can we
Go ahead.
back up?
Yeah.
What is a nurse crop?
A nurse crop is a crop that is planted inside of a field to, I don't want to say nurse, for example, what we do on our farm is we'll go in and we'll plant teff with our alfalfa. And that's just because alfalfa, when it's just a little seedling, is the weakest, pathetic little plant there is. It needs something that can take a beating from the wind and can take something to take care of it so it doesn't, blow out, anything like that. So that's what a nurse crop is. And any time, if you have questions, I talk fast, I ramble, I get on tangents. So if you have any questions, just interrupt me, that's no problem.
So go on down the list. Cover,
Okay.
catch, and smother.
Oh, okay, so explain those? Let me go back to...
Because there are a lot of non-rancher
non-farmers, and I forget that, so I'm glad you're asking that question.
Except Leanne back there, and she knows it all. No. You don't? Oh, okay.
So, nurse crop, I just explained nurse crop. Cover crop is kind of the same premise of a nurse crop. It's not nearly, in my opinion, and again, you ask one farmer, you get one story, you ask another farmer, you get another story. Cover crop is mainly just to cover that whole entire area with, keep your soil in place, stuff like that. Catch crop similar is where you don't want your nutrients, organic material going down, going up, going out, blowing out, same situation. And like I said, a smother crop is something to basically grow fast enough to limit weed growth. And what we've done like on our place is that we'll have pastures that maybe have little bad spots. And instead of having weeds come in there, teff is an annual, it does not come back every year. Instead of having, weeds come into those bad spots in those fields, we'll plant teff just to cover it, and it also grazes off great for our animals.
Terrific, thank you.
No problem. So back to this slide. So this is that picture, and it's kind of hard to tell from this picture, I guess, but you can definitely see the difference. So the picture on the left is teff field 19 days without water. As you can see, it's really small, little plants, sweltering 100-degree heat, and then 30 minutes after I applied water onto that field, it greened up and it looks like that. And when you walked out across that field, you could hear the leaves crunching. And again, the only thing you lose time, and I probably killed all the plants that I crunched, but it came back almost, instantly. And so that's something that's really, really nice, especially here in Fallon. Norm knows this, Leanna knows this, I think a lot of people know this. When you order water, it's not like order water and I want it for this day. It's order water, and when it gets to you, whether that be 2 days or it might be a week, it might be, I've had it as bad as 2 weeks. That's when you get the water. You don't determine when you get your water. And so it's super, super nice. What I always say, and I'm nothing against corn because I also grow corn, but if you did that to a cornfield and stressed it out for 19 days, I think you'd lose the whole entire field. So like I said, extremely drought tolerant and can take a wide range of soil conditions for growing, and it can be used as a cheap cover crop, like I said, and it's versatile in market. So some of the things to take away. Again, this primary presentation was about teff. The reason why I give this presentation is just to get farmers thinking about other crops that they can grow, other options, other avenues. As we all, I guess we don't all know because we're not all farmers. Like this year, for example, and last year, the hay market is in the toilet. My dad jokes around is that right now hay prices are the same hay prices he was getting paid when he was my age. I'm 25, my dad's 63. So it's the same way back in the 60s, 70s, 80s as it is now. That being said, tractors cost $500,000, land cost $15,000 an acre. All these costs have gone up, but we're still getting the same price for the hay. So getting farmers to look at another avenue. And so some of the things that at least come to pop in my head is, growing climate. Can this, whatever crop you select, again, for us it was teff, whatever crop the farmer selects, can it grow in that climate? Can it do what the farmer needs it to do in that climate? The marketability and stability of, said climate. Again, teff's a very niche thing. We have spent a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of energy developing a market, and we got lucky with our market. Again, teff's a superfood, and so when the health foods industry took off, teff took off. And so we just hit it perfectly, I guess. And so are you going to be able to take that crop and actually make a market out of it? Storage, if you grow 1 million pounds of something, do you have somewhere to keep that? Do you have transportation for that, which is the next one down? If you're 6 hours away from the nearest hub where you can do something, is it feasible for you to transport that crop 6 hours and still have enough money to where it was justifiable to grow that crop? And then herbicides and pesticides. If you are growing a super, super niche crop that is not labeled on any sprays, chemicals, herbicides, insecticides, how are you going to manage those pests? I mean, pests are unavoidable. You could be an organic operation, maybe you go down that route, and maybe that pays higher, and you can do that if you want to as well. But those are all things that a farmer has to think about when they're deciding if they want to pursue something that's not in the normal. So that kind of finishes, this is my favorite section. When you're driving through Fallon, you see these checks. And so those are all actually laser leveled in to be a certain degree. So they fall so much in 100 feet. And so 2/10 is generally speaking kind of the average around here. But back in the day, they didn't even laser level. They just planted in fields and flooded it with whatever amount of water it would take. So land leveling and lining of ditches. Some farms in the valley and other valleys are eligible for NRCS funds for these types of projects. They are extremely labor intensive and extremely capital intensive. If you do all the work yourself, you basically break even when it comes to money. Your time's for free, but we're farmers, so we work for free anyway. Very, very capital intensive. I don't think you can touch one of these projects for one of the ones I'm going to display. I think they were all 100 plus. Some of them were even 200 plus thousand dollars. But the water savings can also vary from field to field. It depends on your soil profile, shape of the field, design of the ditch, so on and so forth. And so some of the reasons for land leveling and lining of ditches is it makes farms more user-friendly, time savings as a whole, and again, the water savings. So this is the first field on our farm that we did. I guess technically speaking, not the first one. But so this is a 18-acre field, and it has an allocation of 63 acre feet. Using a simple formula to figure out how many acre feet you use per irrigation is, we order 18 CFS at 14 hours times the widely accepted number of 0.0825 is about 20.79 acre feet used per irrigation. So when you divide that out, you roughly get about 3 irrigations is all in this field. And all of these pictures, you'll see these arrows that are pointing, and that's the way that the water is flowing. So again, the water kind of wraps around this whole entire field and wastes a lot of time, a lot of soil saturation, and wraps around, again, and just in that funny direction. So next slide, Pam. So we came in and we completely redid that field. So that was a concrete ditch as well as land leveling. I think the original fall in that field, I don't even think it had fall in that field. So we added 3/10 fall to that field, which is a little bit more aggressive, so that water moves across the field faster. So again, 18 acres, allocation of 63 acre feet. Now takes 3 hours to irrigate, and that's at 27 CFS. You can get a lot more water through a concrete ditch than you can a dirt ditch. So 27 times the 3 hours, 27 CFS times the 3 hours times the 0.025 results in about 6.6825 acre feet used per irrigation. So that same field where you used to get 3 irrigations, you now get 9.4 irrigations. So you tripled your water efficiency. I'm not saying you're saving water. Again, we're farmers. We have our allocation. We like to use our water. I'm not saying you're saving water, but you're taking your water and making it go further. So this is the next one. This is actually our main farm. This, I grew up irrigating this one. This one was fascinating. So over there on the yellow, you had water coming from opposite directions. So you had one coming from the east and one coming from the west, and they'd meet in the middle. The red ones were separate checks down there, and they came, I guess that'd be east. And then the white ones came west. Again, just funky irrigation. Again, back in the day, that's all they did. That's all they could do. They just kind of, we call it terrace farming, is when you have different, heights of fields. And so just breaking down the math on this one, this is a 33-acre field with 189 acre-feet allocation. 22 CFS at 16 hours resulted in 29.04 acre-feet being used per irrigation. So you got about 6.5 irrigations per year off this 100% water here. Next slide, Pam. So then again, we came in, the 2 checks on the right were kind of left alone, but as you can see, we completely redid that whole entire big field. So the same 33-acre field, now with the ditch and re-leveled, 27 CFS at 10 hours, times the 0.025 is 22 CFS used per irrigation, resulting in 8.4. This is one of those ones where it's really not about the water saving, it's about the user friendliness, because again, you had water going around that whole entire field just to irrigate it, and now I just have a ditch that runs along the bottom of that slide, and that's it. This is the most recent project that we did. I actually just bought this farm from my aunt. This is a 46-acre field with 164 acre-foot allocation. Used to take 18 CFS and took 24 hours to irrigate that 46 acres. So that resulted in 35.6 acre-feet used per irrigation, or 4.6 irrigations total in a year. This one, we didn't switch the directions on. The big savings on this one was getting rid of that dirt ditch and putting in a concrete ditch. So that same field, 30 CFS now, at 6 hours, at that rate was 14.85. I can now irrigate that field 11 times. On spread years, I've irrigated that field as many as 14 times, which it didn't need it. I was just trying to see how far I could go. I don't even know what I would do with 11 irrigations. So this is a prime example of actually water saved. Generally speaking, we always say there's about 8 irrigations here in the valley. Just with the time of stuff, hay, we get about 4 cuttings of hay. Generally speaking, each cutting gets 2 irrigations, so you use about 8 irrigations. This is a prime example. Again, there's 3 extra irrigations, bare minimum, there that I never use. So that's water that stays in the lake or stays in the river, goes out to the refuge, whatever it may be. That's water that I'm not using. That is actually a savings. The other ones, again, you're not quite there, but this one's actually a water savings for the whole entire valley. So now what? And this is my little rant or beef, I guess, about the agriculture industry, and especially being in Nevada. So you've doubled or tripled your water efficiency, but water is only turned on for X amount of days. Just like I said, maybe it'd be nice if they turned the water on for the whole entire year, but it's not feasible. Plants don't grow in certain times of the year. But if they were to give you a little bit of time on each side, that'd be great. But again, not the whole entire valley isn't efficient. And so by the time that I still have my 4 irrigations, 5 irrigations, someone else has ran out of water or is, completely out of water. And so they don't want to keep the whole entire system on just because I saved water, which is fair and valid, but that's something that we're going to have to think about in the future. You're growing crops that conserve water, but are those crops profitable? You're increasing property value on your farm, but infrastructure, those costs are extremely expensive. And you're diversifying your farm's portfolio, but market demand may be limited or even vary. And so these are some of the key things that I always tell people to kind of take away from this presentation, and it's almost personal questions for you to think about yourself. Are any of these things that I just listed as motivating as compensation? Again, NRCS will step in and pay for these projects, but without NRCS paying for these projects, I don't have $120,000 to spend on a concrete ditch. I don't have $200,000 to spend on land leveling. Farmers don't have that kind of money in this kind of market. Again, it's always up and down. Is it worth it to a farmer to go through all of this work to only potentially get financial gains? Again, just saving water and saving your time and stuff like that doesn't mean that you're going to be gaining from these projects or anything like that. Again, the hay market might go down. You just spent all this money doing a concrete ditch.
But you can say that in any business and industry.
Oh, guaranteed,
No.
yeah. Oh, yeah, guaranteed. What in the system has to change to encourage water-saving practices? And this is kind of the big one for me, is just like I stated earlier, I'm contributing and I'm putting water, technically speaking, back in the canal, back in the reservoir. There's really no benefit. So what do we have to change in our system to make farmers want to do these types of projects? Again, I think of this whole entire valley, and leave the big canals. Obviously, they'd be way too expensive. But every single farmer, lined their supply ditch or land leveled their field to be efficient and water saving. That's a huge savings for this whole entire valley. It's a huge savings for people upstream. I think it would cause less fights. So those are just my opinions. And with that, I'll take any questions.
But they're not just opinions, they're based on real experience.
They are based on real life experience, yes.
Anybody in the room or on the phone, do you have any questions for Commissioner Ghetto?
Yeah, I've got a question, if I could, about the TEF.
Could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sorry, I'm Brian Gale, Commissioner from Oakland County.
Thank you.
I'm a rancher in Ruby Valley. I've grown TEF 1 year for hay. I didn't realize it could be used as a grain. You said that you would have to plant in May or early June if you want to take it as a grain. Is that correct?
If you want to take it for grain, and one thing about, so we grow teff, the company grows teff all over Nevada, Arizona, and Southern California. So again, it changes. Like right now, for example, our farmers in Arizona, they planted in January, and we're just now getting that grain shipped into here in Fallon right now. Like trucks are showing up today in Fallon. So it really depends on, what I'm getting at is it's a grass and it's an annual grass. As soon as it freezes, the teff will die. And generally speaking, what I always tell people as well, anything below 65 degrees, teff really doesn't do anything. It wants to be like 90, 100. It'd prefer 110, 120, but I do not, so that's okay. It just cannot freeze is the biggest thing. What I'm getting at with like your example is that we try to grow grain in Winnemucca some years, and some years it does great and it doesn't freeze, but some years it still freezes in Winnemucca in the middle of June and towards the end of June, and then that whole entire crop is lost. So again, it just cannot freeze. So I'm assuming in Ruby Valley you wouldn't have enough time for a grain crop, but just like you said, you grew teff before for hay and you made it work. Maybe you planted a little bit later in the year. It was just the right year.
Okay. So yeah, I wondered about early frost tolerance. Other question, are you suggesting you can broadcast it on relatively bare soil, or does it always have to be drilled in?
No, you can broadcast it. So we don't need, I haven't touched teff in a drill in my whole entire life, I don't think. We have a broadcast seeder, so it's a 50-foot wide broadcast air seeder. And so basically, and we also fly it on with our drones too now that we have the drones. But it's a 50-foot wide broadcast seeder that just basically blows air and the teff seed gets dumped into the boom arms and just gets dropped on the ground.
Okay, now I've seen seeders like that that'll put grain an inch or two below the surface. Is that what you're doing, or are you just dropping it on the surface?
Dropping it directly on the surface.
Wow. Okay. Well, good. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate it.
It's a tiny, tiny little seed, so you have very little margin when it comes to how far you get into the ground. If you get it too far in the ground, you're asking a seed that's the size of a sand pebble particle to get all the way, half an inch up through the soil. It prefers to be on the surface. The only problem, as everyone knows, we live in Nevada, it's windy. When you put it on the surface, just make sure you don't have any wind coming up, because then you'll have certain spots that blow into like collection pools. As long as it stays calm and you get slow water on top of it, it prefers to be on the surface.
So on a pivot, it used to have no problems?
No problems on a pivot.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? Leanne? You're going to have to come up here and get on the record. I know.
Bring all your stuff up here and get a microphone.
Yeah, just sit down at one of these empty seats. That's okay. You might like to sit in the back, but you're going to speak in the front.
The truth is that I'm not an extrovert, I'm actually an introvert. Surprise, huh? Miles, I have a couple questions, please. 3, is that okay? Yes. First of all, the risk is high. How do you cover your risk? 1. Can't run in the red, and the risk coverage, the insurance coverage, should cover that if you have a catastrophic loss. And the big one, which all of us are so interested in, it's a drought tolerant. It saves us water, and you're efficient. But in the valley, we cannot store water. If we save to use it, if we could save it to use late fall or early spring, that would be a better efficient use of all our efforts to become more efficient. How can we get this done?
So the first part was the risk, I guess. So yeah, if you have you can get crop insurance and stuff like that. I personally can't afford it, so I don't get crop insurance. Generally speaking, and that's the nice thing about picking teff, for example. It's fast growing and very, very quick. And so if I plant a field in mid-May and it gets up to be about this tall and it's just a windy year and it gets blown out in spots, I can go back in there and throw more TEF on it and rewater it and get it up. So that's what's nice. It's not super capital intensive to put in the TEF. I'm assuming the risk was about the TEF, correct? And so it's not, we always figure, again, I plant 2 pounds an acre and the seed cost about $2.50 a pound, so I'm talking $5 an acre to plant. It's so cheap to plant compared to corn. I just got my corn numbers back for the corn ground I planted. It was $275 an acre to plant my corn. So again, very, very cheap. So I'm not too worried about the risk aspect on the TEF. Again, other crops might be different. And then your second question was, what can you do to change it? I have no idea.
What do we do? Because it's so important.
It's very, very important. And again, and that's why I always encourage farmers to look into these programs that NRCS does and operates, is I think if you had enough people, if you started showing a water savings and that we actually do have water still left over in the reservoir, maybe we should look at that or entertain that. But right now, there's very, very few people doing these projects, in my opinion at least. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, I'd say probably 10 to 15 farmers in the valley, out of a lot of farmers in this valley, just so everyone's aware, that actually entertain these projects and try to become more water efficient with these projects. So if more people got on board, in my head at least, TCID would see that Truckee Carson Irrigation District would kind of highlight that everyone's moving towards efficiency. Maybe we need a reward for that efficiency, and since we are saving so much water, we could entertain a early spring or a late fall irrigation season.
As the saved water is actually ours, but then we dump it.
Yep.
So the efficiency would really spread a lot further and create more farming and more produce and more food that we need to do.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Just don't know how to get there.
Oh, one more question, please.
Go ahead.
Do you run as organic?
Leanne, I wonder, would you like to interview him after the meeting?
No, I just want one more question.
Okay, quickly.
Organic?
Yes. What about?
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just a comment maybe related to your question, Leanne and Commissioner. So as I'm sure you know, I also work with the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority, and that group is working with the Division of Water Resources on conjunctive management. And in that basin, of course, there's not enough water to serve all of the water rights, particularly the decreed surface rights in Pershing County for the water district. And with regard to how do you utilize conserved water in a case of, say, the Humboldt River Basin and maybe in the Carson Basin as well, there's discussion about using saved water as offsets so that instead of being reduced on the front end, you actually get a credit for what you've saved. And so I think that's maybe a more global issue, maybe not for an individual, or maybe it is something that an individual water right holder that's irrigating land could utilize, but on a collective basis, there ought to be, well, at least there should be some discussion about the potential of using that as an offset or a credit.
Oh, agreed. Thank
That's
you for
a
that
great
info.
idea. All right, any other questions?
Just one quick one. What was the grain production compared to other grains? It says 1,500 pounds per acre.
Yeah, 1,500 pounds per acre. Are you asking what is a wheat
the
field yield?
Compared to other grain?
So wheat yields anywhere between 6,000 and 9,000 pounds per acre. But I'm going to jump in there, and the problem with wheat, for example, and I'm not going to give too much information away here, but 1,500 pounds per acre times that 250, let's say, that's what we can sell it for very comfortably. Most of the time we sell it for more than that. You're looking at a couple $1,000s an acre when you sell into the planting seed industry versus wheat, where I also grow wheat for grain, and I sell my wheat for about 15 cents per pound. And so then it drags it back down. You think oh, you're getting more yield off of this field, but in all reality, you're actually making less even though you're getting more yield. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. You did a great job. Thanks. Okay. Moving on. Item 10. Laurel Sido is with us, and thank you. Oh, Jeff, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just before Laurel starts her presentation, I just want
Oh, okay. Item 10 is an agrivoltaics as an alternative as groundwater rights are retired, presentation by Laurel Saito. Jeff, you wanted to introduce her? You go right ahead.
Yeah, I do, and Laurel has been before this group before, but before Laurel starts her presentation, I just want to mention that Commissioner Ghetto's presentation and Ms. Saito's presentation were two presentations made at the Nevada Water Resources Annual Conference this last January, and it was on a panel, I think two of the 4 or 5 presentations on a statewide panel on agriculture. The title of the panel was Agriculture Amidst Water Scarcity, How to Make It Work. And so both of these presentations were made, were on that panel and made at that water conference. I just want to transition into a little bit of a pitch for Nevada Water Resources Association, because we've got a lot of new members who may not be familiar with that organization. Laurel's been very much involved with that as well. The Nevada Water Resources Association is the professional organization for water rights, water resources in the state of Nevada. They're not a political organization or anything like that. They don't do any lobbying. Technical presentations, we talk a little bit about policies, but mostly technical information. There's an annual conference, typically the end of January, and it alternates between Sparks and Las Vegas. This year it was at Sparks Nugget. Next year it will be in Las Vegas. And so CNRWA has been an organizational member of the Nevada Water Resources Association for a number of years, and every year CNRWA sponsors one director or representative from each member county of CNRWA to pay for their registration fee to attend. I know a number of folks that are sitting here and on the phone have benefited from that. And I know that also NWRA conferences are typically held at places where you can find lodging relatively inexpensively, and for example, the Sparks, they get great room rates for the conference, and so there's also classes that you can take associated with those conferences, and then as an organizational member, CNRWA also has the opportunity to participate in workshops and get reduced registration fees for other types of training opportunities. So I just want to put that plug in there, and also just inform our new members especially of our support for NWRA. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laurel Saito, who again has been before this board, and someone who has been really extremely helpful, and we worked with very closely on a number of bills in this legislative session that we'll get to in the next agenda item. So, Laurel.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for the pitch for NWRA. I do think it's a really great organization, and in some ways I like that Nevada's kind of a smaller state, because at that conference you can meet just about everybody who's working on water in the state. So it's really, I encourage folks to attend. And thanks for inviting me here to talk about the study that we did with Jake Tibbetts and also my colleague Peter Gower at the Nature Conservancy in Diamond Valley to take a look at using agrivoltaics as an alternative as you retire groundwater rights. And if you're wondering what agrivoltaics means, it's the integration of agriculture and solar energy production on the same piece of land. And I'm going to talk about how it could be related to groundwater rights retirement. So hopefully we'll see if this works. Oops. Okay, it does work. All right, so we did this study in Diamond Valley, partly because the groundwater management plan that's stepping down groundwater use in Diamond Valley, but also because it is near existing and potential transmission lines. So these gray lines on this map are existing transmission lines. And Eureka County is about 81% federal lands. So most economic development in the county is associated with these public lands, which often trigger NEPA and other hoops to jump through. But the southern part of Diamond Valley is agricultural with a lot of private land, And so this can make it appealing to renewable energy developers who are interested in the green energy transition. There is already significant interest in solar on private land in Diamond Valley, and about 4,000 acres are already under site control by 2 separate solar energy companies. And much of this acreage under site control is land where water rights were retired under the Nevada Water Conservation and Infrastructure Initiative that I'm going to talk about in a couple of slides. So, as you know, groundwater overuse is a concern in Nevada with many hydrographic areas that are overpumped. And Diamond Valley is hydrographic area 153, and it has a perennial yield of 30,000 acre-feet, but is over-appropriated by more than 350% and overpumped by more than 160%. And so this has led to declining groundwater levels, as shown on this right figure here, with declines of more than 100 feet in some areas. In 2015, Diamond Valley was designated as a critical management area, and a groundwater management plan was subsequently developed and approved. And the groundwater management plan implements a schedule for reducing groundwater use in Diamond Valley over time, as shown in this middle graph here, with a steep decline in groundwater pumping to be implemented in the first 10 years of the plan. And the picture on the left is showing these low elevation spray application, or LISA sprinklers, and these are used a lot by the farmers in Diamond Valley to reduce their consumptive use of water. And this has helped, but to stabilize the groundwater table, land will have to come out of irrigated production. It's not possible for Diamond Valley to achieve groundwater sustainability with conservation alone. So a potential tool for reducing consumptive use of groundwater permanently in areas where the groundwater table is declining is due to overuse of groundwater is groundwater rights retirement, where water right holders can voluntarily retire water rights that cannot be available for any use in the future. And in 2023, Senate Bill 176 was proposed to establish a Nevada Water Buyback Initiative in the Nevada Conservation and Recreation Program of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. Now, there was broad support for this bill, but it did not pass out of the legislature. So in 2024, the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources implemented the Nevada Water Conservation and Infrastructure Initiative that used $25 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds to retire groundwater rights in Nevada by the end of 2024. And you guys have heard a lot about this, but we consider this a pilot to test the interest and effectiveness of groundwater rights retirement in Nevada. And in Diamond Valley, over 11,000 acre-feet of groundwater rights were retired through this program, and this was over about 3,000 acres. So the success of this program and persistence of many stakeholders like Jeff and Jake Tibbetts and legislators led to the passage of AB 104 and SB 36 in the 2025 session to enable a Nevada voluntary water rights retirement program. And both bills have been signed by the governor, and they create this program for 10 years. And I'm not going to go into the details of the bills because Jeff has already talked to you about them, and he's probably going to talk to you about them again in the next agenda item. But one of the questions that comes up often when we talk about groundwater rights retirement is what to do with the land once the irrigation is removed. And so this study looked at the feasibility of permanently retiring groundwater rights and implementing agrivoltaics without irrigation, as well as the receptiveness of the community to this type of project. So our study had 2 phases, with the first phase involving community scoping, and we hired a third party to do a situation assessment that got input from a range of potentially affected interests. And then they also facilitated a community meeting to present study concepts and get input from the community on this topic of retiring groundwater rights and agrivoltaics. And so we used the information from phase 1 to do the second phase of the study to address the technical feasibility of retiring groundwater rights while transitioning corresponding land to agrivoltaics in Diamond Valley. And so I'm going to share some key findings from that study and report. So first I'm going to talk about our findings on groundwater rights retirement. So an important concern expressed in the situation assessment for this study was about having a fair and robust system to retire water rights to reduce water use. Successful programs that involve water transactions need to be perceived to be equitable and fair, and that there is predictability in the outcome of the process. So the desired outcome of groundwater rights retirement is stabilization of declining groundwater levels. So groundwater rights that are being retired should actually be in active use, current use. It is hoped that the pilot groundwater rights retirement program that was done by the Nevada Water Conservation Infrastructure Initiative, as well as lessons learned from other states that have also done groundwater rights retirement, will help to design a fair and effective program for Nevada. And it's also important that appropriate values are used for groundwater rights transactions. We did not do a full valuation for this in our report because we didn't have, it was beyond the scope of our research, but valuation of groundwater rights will require complex analysis due to limited data on water transactions involving groundwater rights retirement. So any future valuations analysis will need to incorporate multiple valuation methodologies to arrive at a defensible range of values for Diamond Valley groundwater rights. And so as part of this study, we did complete foundational research to prepare and lower the cost of future valuations, and more details are in our report. Other considerations for groundwater rights retirement include provisions to address erosion, weeds, rodents, and establishment of vegetation that can be part of conservation programs used to retire water rights. And this could include compensation for capping wells or allowing a small amount of water to establish vegetation or allowance of stock water if the land is to be used for grazing. So now I'm going to present some key findings about agrivoltaics. And as I mentioned earlier, agrivoltaics are the integration of solar photovoltaic systems with agricultural production. And agricultural activities associated with panels could include cropping beneath and alongside the panels. And if you're coupling agrivoltaics with groundwater rights retirement, it's more likely that there would be dryland agriculture or grazing amongst the panels. And in those cases, considerations need to be made about the height and spaces between panels that can accommodate equipment that might be needed or animal interactions. The map on the left there is showing that the southwestern United States has the nation's highest solar irradiance, so it is attractive for solar energy development. And Diamond Valley has the right amount of solar irradiance, which makes utility scale solar energy development economically and technologically feasible. Solar developers obtain legal authority, which is also called site control, over a project site by purchasing the property or executing a lease with the landowner. Once the solar developer secures enough leases to develop a utility scale project, then the solar developer secures a power purchase agreement with an entity that will purchase the power. And at our phase 1 meeting, a solar developer there said they were looking for 3,000 acres of leases in Diamond Valley for a feasible project. So we identified some considerations for landowners when entering into leases with solar developers. So these are things that we thought should be included in a lease with the solar developer. You want to have the conditions for payment amounts and timing and the lease duration, as well as if the lease precludes or limits other land uses like agriculture. What to do with if there's a risk for the solar developer following through on the terms of the lease, like filing for bankruptcy. Tax implications, because one of the things we learned was that ag lands often have deferred taxes, but if the land is converted to a higher use, the deferred taxes may come due. And I'm going to say more about this in a little bit.
Laurel, I have a question. If the lease is on the BLM, will the solar developer have to get a modification to the lease in order to integrate the photovoltaics?
I can't answer that question. We were mostly thinking about leases on private land because of Diamond Valley agricultural land. So,
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I can't answer
No,
that
that's
question.
okay. I just know in Nye County, the significant number of solar projects are on land leased from the BLM.
Yeah, I think probably one of my colleagues could answer that question at the Nature Conservancy.
I'm just going to
but
say
not me.
yes, I bet it would. Yeah, okay, thank you.
So then also just one last thing to consider if you're doing a lease is the provisions for decommissioning the project. So electricity generated at a solar photovoltaic facility enters the grid via a substation. And a solar project that's farther away from a substation is more costly and technologically challenging than a project closer to a substation, because a solar project developer would need to construct a generation tie power line to connect the generation facility with the nearest substation. And during phase one of the project, NV Energy told us that transmission lines cost up to about $3 million per mile. So it can be very costly, that connection. The closest substation to Diamond Valley is the Machasik substation that's owned and operated by NV Energy in partnership with Mount Wheeler Power, and it's indicated by that dotted star on the map there. And it's at capacity and cannot accept any new interconnections. So another possibility is a line tap to a transmission line, but that requires adding a small substation to an existing transmission line. But there are 2 existing transmission lines near Diamond Valley, and both are owned by NV Energy. Now, NV Energy is proposing the Greenlink North project, which would include a new 525 kilovolt transmission line paralleling an existing line along Highway 50, and it's that green line on the map there. And a new substation is planned at the Red Star in Lander County, but the capacity for Greenlink North is already limited because of other proposed energy generation projects, which makes connecting new solar energy generated in Diamond Valley to the grid via Greenlink North somewhat uncertain. However, Jake likes to point out that the Western Solar Plan that was recently approved by BLM includes a lot of public lands available for solar development. So those are the green areas on this map. And there is, including near Diamond Valley, and I put a star where Diamond Valley is. So the state's renewable energy mandate means that more transmission lines are likely. And again, since public lands will require NEPA, the private lands in Diamond Valley will still probably be attractive to solar developers. So irrigation in Diamond Valley uses center pivots with about 125 acres irrigated on 160 acre quarter sections. So we mapped irrigation water rights with potential and existing transmission lines and used 1, 5, and 10 mile buffers from the transmission lines to estimate the solar energy or the energy generation potential. And based on this analysis, we saw that there's about 250 to over 5,000 megawatts of solar energy generation potential in Diamond Valley. So some other considerations. Diversification of income can be an advantage for landowners implementing agrivoltaics because income from solar energy leases can mitigate volatility of agricultural income, and energy costs may be reduced if landowners are allowed to use the energy generated. And then solar panels may be able to improve water use efficiency by improving soil moisture beneath the panels, and crops beneath panels may increase solar panel efficiency by lowering panel temperatures. And then, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we became aware of doing this study was about property tax implications when farmland is converted to a use such as solar energy. So we did a hypothetical analysis in the report, but under Nevada statutes, if the land was converted to a higher value, the previous 7 years of agricultural deferred taxes could be due. And this, in our sample analysis, this was about $14,000 that was on the landowner who was doing that transition. So, but I've noted Assembly Bill 479, which passed this session to address this issue. So this is, we took information we learned from the report and applied it at this session. So the bill defines agrivoltaic purposes, and then it also allows lands used for agrivoltaic purposes to qualify for the ag use assessment if the land was agricultural real property and qualified for the ag use assessment before it was used for agrivoltaic purposes. So if the land is already in agriculture and it transitions to agrivoltaics, it would still qualify for the ag deferred taxes. There's also a provision in the bill that says that if you're getting a tax abatement for the solar, then you don't qualify for the ag deferment. So try to avoid some double dipping. So then, let's see. Okay. So some other things on vegetation options for Diamond Valley. So most of the soil types under irrigation in Diamond Valley are well suited for establishment of vegetation that can subsist and persist on precipitation alone. So this background photo here is the wildland user interface near the irrigated lands in Diamond Valley, where crested wheatgrass and basin wild rye are growing without irrigation. Studies of plant yields with agrivoltaics have had mixed results, with some showing increased yields and others showing decreased yields as compared to fields with no solar panels. But most of those studies were not looking at dry land agriculture in arid lands like Nevada. So we need to do more study to figure out what those yields might be. Grazing of livestock is common for agrivoltaic farms, with sheep and goats being attractive for helping with vegetation removal and erosion control, and having a small enough size to pass through solar layouts without damaging equipment. Some options for establishing vegetation to replace irrigated crops with agrivoltaics include, without limitation, dryland grazing forage for livestock, growing native grasses and beneficial non-native grasses like crested wheatgrass to harvest seeds for land restoration or wildfire rehabilitation, establishing sagebrush grassland habitat to receive sellable credits to benefit sage-grouse, and implementing habitat under a conservation plan to receive payment through a USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service program and other similar opportunities. So our final reports are available on Eureka County's website and also on the Nature Conservancy's Groundwater Resource Hub. And we also recently published a paper, a journal article, and I brought a few copies here if any of you are interested in reading the article about the study. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Laurel, aren't there any current active operations in Nevada?
No, not at this time. So there is interest from University of Nevada Cooperative Extension. Misha Allen is very interested in implementing
Yeah, she's talked to
agrivoltaics.
me about that a lot.
Yeah. But currently, there's no projects with agrivoltaics in Nevada. There are in other states. But, I think one of the questions we have is, what can we do here where we're so dry? And, again, we were curious if we thought it could work if you don't irrigate because of the situation of taking lands out of production with groundwater rights retirement. And it looks probable that we could do it, but we need to demonstrate it. So that is one thing we're working on with Jake, is trying to see if we could get a demonstration project going in Diamond Valley.
So if somebody's interested, do they contact you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Chris Weigenseller, does the shading from the panels limit what you can do underneath?
It depends. It probably depends on the crop. But a lot of the studies have shown that it actually can be beneficial because it can help with soil moisture and holding more water in the soil. And then if you are doing livestock grazing, it can provide shade for the livestock. So,
Goes both ways.
It could be, yes.
Yeah, I noticed one of your photos. I was just telling Norm, the cows don't seem to mind it. They're all grazing right in the shade of the panels.
Mm-hmm.
Those were sheep.
And yeah, that's what I was thinking. I would wrap some kind of brush thing around it.
Yes,
they
so
can scratch.
there's definitely research going on cattle grazing with the panels because of their tendency to cause some damage to the infrastructure. And so we actually have applied for a grant for Diamond Valley because to see if we can do some sort of study about doing cattle grazing amidst the panels and what the infrastructure would need to be in order so that it would not be damaged by the cows.
Laurel, is there any interest in areas outside of Diamond Valley?
I think so, yes.
We have desert lands and things
yes.
that could be put to use near power lines, near
Right.
substations. And
Yeah.
you have interest in those?
So the Nature Conservancy would be interested in any of those. I mean, so, we're interested partly because of, I'm interested because of hopefully reduced water use. But we also have folks that are interested on the energy side for implementing renewable energy, but in places where the land's already disturbed. We are, we'd like to see more renewable energy development on already disturbed lands as opposed to undisturbed land that might be habitat for other species. So, agrivoltaics is kind of interest for our organization. But so we're interested in just finding who's interested in it and seeing if we could get a demonstration project somewhere. And Misha is also interested in that. Even though she's Nye County Extension Coordinator, she's interested, she wants to get a demonstration project because she can't convince people in Nye County without, having some place to show what this looks like and how much energy are you generating.
She was hoping Tonopah Solar Energy would be interested. Still no.
Yeah, so, but I think if we could get a demonstration project going and we could gather some good data from that, we would have better information. And we have an economist on our team as well, because we want to think about, what's the economic feasibility of all of this? Are you going to be able to make any money from doing this, or is this like, not really feasible for agricultural producers?
It would also be great to be put on marginal farmland. It would be great to put this on marginal farmland, where it brings it pretty much more into production without water.
Yep. Yes, we're interested in that. So Norm, if you have some places that you're aware of that might be interested, we'd love to talk to you.
Yeah,
I've got a question.
One of the things that we've had that I've witnessed over time is there's so much competition because you have, at least in Churchill County, we've got so many geothermal plants that control a lot of land. They have power purchase agreements in place already. They have power substations in place. And so to get interest in putting in another solar field, they really don't have a whole lot of interest in it. But it's just a marketplace competition.
Someone on the phone had a question?
Yes, I do. Brian Gale, Elko County Commissioner. Thanks, Laurel, for the lovely presentation. I understand that there are some crops that prefer a little bit of shade throughout the day. I guess raspberries is one of them. Are there any grazing crops that work that way? I know the grass under my trampoline grows really well. But have they identified crops that prefer a little bit of shade throughout the day?
Yeah, I think some other studies have looked at that, but we feel like we need to do our own experimentation here in Nevada, because a lot of those other studies have been done in places where there's a lot more precipitation or they are irrigating. And what we really want to see is what do our crops do here, or our plants do here. And of course, Jake is pretty interested in the crested wheatgrass and the basin wild rye, because he's seeing it already growing without irrigation there. And, but the question is, what will it do under shade? And does that matter, right? So that's why we want to do these, kind of figure out how to do a demonstration project where we can set up some experimental design to kind of test some of those questions that we have. We're optimistic that it will grow, but we need the data to show it.
Well, one other thing to potentially consider is perhaps some crops that would require irrigation could grow right under the panel where any rain will drip, because of course the panel will concentrate the rainfall to a strip. Right. Something like maybe sandfoin might be able to survive there. I know I have a few places where sandfoin is working, even though it should require irrigation.
Yeah, and there have been studies done about that too, of using the panels to kind of collect water and then distribute the water underneath the panels. And so they have done that in some studies as well. So there's a lot of research going on this, except I don't see the research going on in dry areas like Nevada. And that's what we'd really like to do before we say, oh, it can't be done here. But I think we're optimistic that it can be done here, but we got to figure out what are the crops that could grow, or Jake doesn't like me to say crops because we're not irrigating. So, but what plants can grow, or what forage materials can grow, or can we produce seeds? So another thing that the Nature Conservancy is involved in is trying to increase the native seed market for wildfire rehabilitation, because mostly what is used in Nevada right now is seed from other states. And we'd like to see if these native seeds, for plants that actually already grow here, might be something that could be cultivated and then used more successfully for wildfire rehabilitation. And we're thinking those might be able to grow with these panels because they also don't require, as much water, ideally.
Again, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate your work on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, hold on. Is there anyone else in the room or on the phone who would like to address a question to Laurel? Leanne, you have one question? Yes. You need to turn your mic on.
Laurel, could you please tell me with the top 5 preferences of Trump's choices of energy, where would you put solar panels?
I'm not sure I can answer that question either.
It's not very high, which means we don't have a lot of support coming from there. And if we don't have a lot of support, how will we have longevity to go forward? That would be my one question. And thank you, Laurel. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanne. Jeff, would you like to wrap this up? Anything you want to say?
No, except,
Hello.
Yeah, just a moment. Jeff is speaking.
Go ahead, Lou. Someone's got a comment.
Oh, does someone have a question? I guess not. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is really great work and something, again, is really compatible and really, quite frankly, I think, a piece of the water rights retirement program that this organization implemented in the interim before this last legislative session, because we always knew that mitigation of those previously irrigated lands to prevent detrimental impacts, including rodents and weeds and dust and everything in between, and was going to be a big issue. And we did the best we could with the time that we had, and really it was about establishing a cover crop with some limited water to remain on that land for that purpose, and then eventually maybe convert it to some other manner of use like stock water. But having the potential maybe to convert your previously irrigated land to something more or different in a higher use, and notwithstanding the current position or support for renewable energy, this is something I think is not going to happen overnight. In fact, as Laurel indicated, we don't have the data yet to go out there and start talking about this is something that's feasible for the state or even portions of the state. But having that potential for future development of a land after that water right is retired and that land is no longer irrigated is potentially a really big part of, I think, moving forward with water rights retirement in general. So.
All right, thank you. And Laurel, thank you. It's always a pleasure to see you at these meetings. Thank you. Jeff, we're going to move to item number 11 and have you give us a recap on the 2025 legislative session.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Where to begin? Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge Alex Tanchek, who was working with CNRWA under contract to be there every day and attend all the meetings and take notes and do all the things that I couldn't do on a day-to-day basis. And it was a great support to me. And there were a number of other folks that were associated with CNRWA and worked with us and Laurel Saito and the Nature Conservancy on the groundwater rights retirement bills in particular. Nevada Farm Bureau has been a great partner, and Jake Tibbetts and others, Chris Mahana, a lot of folks. But let me just give a little bit of background, and then we'll get into detail of some of the bills, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I guess. But leading up to this legislative session, there was a group of stakeholders that convened almost around this time in 2023. to get ready for the next legislative session. And I guess that is one of the things that has evolved, I guess, is even though the legislature sine died on June 2nd, is it 2nd or 3rd? 2nd. You know, people are already talking about what we need to be doing for the next legislative session, which is, you know, a year and a half away. And I think this past session really proved the necessity for getting together early and often and having, you know, a large group of folks working on these issues. And that was, in fact, was highlighted during the legislative session. And so that led to the success, I'm sure, led to the success of at least a couple of the bills this session. We'll get into the details of that. So anyway, this session started out with 24 water-related bills that I'm aware of that we tracked, probably a few others that we didn't really track that may have had some water issue in them but weren't necessarily of concern to this group. And we ended up with very few that were actually signed by the governor. So what I want to do is just highlight the ones that were signed by the governor, and then just give a quick overview of those and sort of how all that happened. Excuse me, and then talk about a few bills that weren't signed by the governor or sent to the governor and didn't make it out of the legislature that I think are issues that we're likely to see come forward again in the next legislative session. So, and I'll also back up and say that we had a lot of interest and support from the Interim Joint Standing Committee on Natural Resources, which will meet again probably starting in around January, February of next year to get ready for the next legislative session, and that is a combination of the Assembly and Senate Natural Resources subcommittee of those committee of those members, or group of those members from each of those committees. We had a lot of support from that interim committee for our bills this session. So let me start with the little spreadsheet that was sent out, and we'll start with the bills that were signed by the governor, and AB 104 is at the top of the list. That was the omnibus bill that was worked on over the interim, right up to pretty much the last day of the session with amendments. This bill started out as sort of just an idea for what is it that we can put into one bill that would encompass all of sort of the collective interests of water stakeholders in the state, that wouldn't, and the primary condition was that it would not have a fiscal note, so that it wouldn't cost the state anything to implement, so that it wouldn't have to go to a Ways and Means or Finance Committee and get bogged down there, or perhaps never make it out of there. And so during the interim, the Water Rights Retirement Program, making that program that was the pilot program that we, along with Humboldt River Basin Water Authority and Walker River Subconservancy, and to some extent Southern Nevada Water Authority, also implemented during the interim, making that a permanent program. So that was really the centerpiece. The Southern Nevada Water Authority had some measures that they wanted to include with regard to their water conservation program, replacement of turf, septic tank hookups to community sewer, municipal sewer, and things of that nature. There were a couple of things in there that the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection wanted in terms of more flexibility from implementing US EPA rules. And so that bill was enacted. I helped present that in the Senate, along with the Southern Nevada Water Authority and a representative of the mining industry, Alan Biaggi. I think he was representing mining, but he was sort of the chair of our stakeholder working group, and signed by the governor. It passed out of both houses unanimously. It was a long, challenging path to get that signed, primarily because it did have a fiscal note, even though we didn't ask for one. And let me just, well, I'll get back to that in a minute, but eventually it was sent to the governor and signed. The topic of fiscal notes, and for those who may not be familiar with how this process works, but when a bill is drafted, it's introduced into a committee, and the first thing that happens is the committee will have the bill introduced. It's up to the committee chair whether or not to have a hearing on that bill. If the bill is heard, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to get a vote, because then it requires the chair of that committee to have a vote on the bill through what's a different type of hearing. It's called a work session. So those are the steps for getting a bill approved. If the bill, so once a bill is introduced, the state sends out, the state Office of Finance or Budget Office, they send out a survey, if you will, or questionnaire to state agencies and all local governments. So for county commissioners that are on this board, your commission, I don't know who exactly within your county would get this, maybe your if you have a county manager or your county auditor, but those bills, if there looks like there could be an impact to local governments, your county gets that, and you have an opportunity to say, oh, this will cost us money.
No, I think you're required to.
You're not required.
You aren't?
You don't have to fill it
Okay.
out. Nope. It's not a requirement. But you would be remiss, I think, if there is a fiscal note.
Well, yeah, if there's a
fiscal.
fiscal note attached and you don't weigh in, that's
Yeah, that's on you.
pretty stupid.
For a lot of these bills that never got a hearing or were not ever enacted, it's because the state put a fiscal note on it. And so that really was the result, that really resulted in a lot of these bills not getting moved at all. And in some cases, the bill was actually heard, there was a hearing on it, but then because there was a fiscal note on the bill, it automatically has to go to either the Senate Finance Committee or Assembly Ways and Means Committee, along with 300 or 400 other bills. And they just don't get to all the bills because they're exempt bills, they're held to the end of the session, like the last week of the session mostly, for hearing. And that was the case for a couple of our bills. But in any event, AB 104 is one of those bills. We got through the process, we worked with the state, we amended AB 104 to make it so that the state would remove their fiscal note, which they did, and made it out. So that's one bill that was enacted, an important bill. And lots of recognition about the collective interests in working together with stakeholders, even the chair of the interim committee and helped present the bill and made those comments. The next bill that was signed by the governor was AB 132. That just increases the size. That was Assemblyman Urick. Also passed out unanimously, both houses. It increased the size of guzzlers that you could have for a guzzler and the distance, I think, from a quarter mile to a half a mile for a pipeline of a guzzler. Let's see.
Jeff, maybe you don't want to answer this, but I'm curious, what do you think of the bills that exempt the state engineer of liability for certain actions?
So that one, yeah,
like AB 26.
so let's go back. I'm sorry, I missed that one. AB 26, that bill really doesn't affect, unless there's so many dams in the central region I'm not aware of, that were once owned by the Bureau of Reclamation, was about sort of jurisdiction on federal dams that were previously owned or built by the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation, that are now in private hands, like the Rye Patch Dam and the authority for the state engineer to inspect those dams. But then there was also a provision in there that indemnifies the state engineer or the Division of Water Resources from any liability if there are, something happens to those dams that wasn't necessarily, as I understand, necessarily caught by the inspection process or something like that. And again, I'd have to go back and look at the exact language, but it basically provides some indemnification for the Division of Water Resources. There's a cleanup bill, they said, and passed that unanimously out of both houses. So that was AB 26. So AB 132, and then that's 3, and then
Can I ask you one more question, really quick? Some areas are highlighted and some aren't. Is there a explanation for that?
Yeah, there is, and only because I was trying to just delineate, so on the spreadsheet, when you look at the spreadsheet, it looked like everything was just kind of running together. So it worked on the first page, but not on the second page.
Oh,
for
got
some
it,
reason.
okay. I thought there was some code.
Yeah, I guess when it printed out.
I kept looking at the status of each bill, and I would think, oh, I've got it now.
Has nothing to do
Oh,
with
wait, I don't have
status, it was just trying to separate the different bills so you could read them a little bit easier, that's a formatting issue. So those are the only 3 assembly bills. For the Senate, this was a bill that was proposed and supported by the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority in support of the Desert Research Institute, and I helped present this bill as well in the Senate. And this is the cloud seeding bill. So this continues the appropriation of $1.2 million for the upcoming biennium for DRI to continue cloud seeding, which is really important for the Humboldt region, but in the central region, DRI, does cloud seeding in the Spring Mountains for the Pahrump Basin, Basin 162. So we highlighted that on behalf of CNRWA as one of their activities. And this is really significant because there were years where cloud seeding was not supported by the state. This was originally a program that the state supported every year. And then when the budget got tight, they dropped it because it wasn't sort of a mandated program, and it got resurrected last biennium. And, we thought, well, last biennium was just going to be another one-off because the budget was pretty healthy. But, and given where the budget was for this biennium, for the projections for the projections for the upcoming biennium being several $100 million short, we thought there wasn't going to be a chance that we would get this appropriated or supported, but it was heard and it was due past, and so the cloud seeding program will continue at least for the next biennium. So that was really great.
I want to ask a question, Jeff. Commissioner Strickland, are you still on the phone?
Yes, Chair.
Hey, can you tell us, was the cloud seeding program, do you think the cloud seeding program in Pahrump was successful? I know it's been going on for quite a few years.
Excuse me. DRI reported to us on their annual report. We've paid for, I can't remember if it's a 3 or 5 year program through the Nye County District Water Governing Board. We added 5,000 acre feet of water to our basin according to their stats.
I'd call that successful.
Yeah, when you're a recharge of 20, I'd call that very successful.
Thank you.
And
I
might add, Commissioner Strickland, you probably heard this as well, that they were able to do that at a cost of less than $10 an acre foot.
Indeed. Yeah, we're very proud of that program, and I'm glad the state is recognizing that this is a tool that we need to be using.
How many washed out roads came with that gain?
None, by the way, because it is snow melt, and that's what the people need to understand. It's snow that's creating, not rainwater.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. The other Senate bill, and this was the, quote, standalone water rights retirement bill, so exact same language as the provision for water rights retirement in AB 104, the omnibus bill, was also sent to the governor and signed. And just a couple of comments about this. Lots of appreciation to the Nature Conservancy. They really worked hard on this bill as well as 104, but particularly this bill as a standalone bill. And initially, there was a lot of, there were a lot of questions about why do we need two bills? And it was a task to keep them coordinated throughout the session. I mean, there would be literally a two-word change in one of the bills because they were heard in separate houses, and then we'd have to immediately get an amendment in the other bill in the other house and go back and forth. We did that probably 3 times. And at the end, we started to realize that, well, both of these bills are getting a lot of support. And what do we do if they're both, passed? We're going to send them both to the governor for signature, and the chairs of the 2 committees and all the stakeholders and folks said, yeah, let's just get them both over there. There's no reason why we can't send 2 bills with identical language to the governor for his signature, and that's exactly what happened. And so not only did the governor sign 1 water rights retirement bill, he actually signed 2, or at least 2 bills with water rights retirement in there. And this went through the same process with having to work with the Division of Water Resources to reduce the workload and fiscal impact so that could be done. And this one sort of lagged behind 104 by a little bit. And then it was like watching these, 2 bills having a race, which one was going to get to the governor first. But a couple things. This language is fairly close to what was in the original Senate Bill 176. The difference, and the big difference here, is that there is no funding source specifically tied to this program. However, it does have a provision that, well, it's tied, there's no guaranteed funding. It is tied to funding sources to the extent it makes water rights retirement eligible for funding under the Drinking Water Grant Program, the old AB 198 program. So water rights can be retired under that program, but that's a competitive program along with other irrigation efficiencies, and that program started out as a program to help small rural water systems fix their infrastructure and comply with drinking water standards. Water rights retirement is also eligible under the Conservative Nevada Bond Program, and we think that there could be some potential for private foundations and other organizations that would be willing to retire water rights. And in fact, this was an important question I know that I was asked a couple of times in committee hearings. Why are we setting up a program if we don't have funding? Well, we don't have funding today. There's the possibility of funding through these competitive grant programs, but more importantly, if there is funding available, we want to make sure we've got a program in place to be able to utilize it. And then, so anyway, and the other piece in here, the other piece that's not in here that was in the original bill was the requirement for an advisory board and for regulations. And honestly, I don't know if it was the state or we sort of kind of talked about this, but CNRWA and HRBWA did a water rights retirement program without doing regulations, and I think it turned out pretty well. And not only that, but we developed all of the forms, the paperwork, the processes. And so I think a lot of that, if not most of it or all of it, can be utilized in an ongoing program. But I think the state can handle a program like this without having to go through a whole regulatory process. So I think we'll start working on that with the state, at least sitting down and trying to work through some of these issues. So that, and then the only other Senate bill, so 3 Assembly bills, 3 Senate bills, and the third Senate bill is Senate Bill 276. This had to do with reporting spills, a requirement to report spills in rivers. So apparently, several years ago, there was somehow uncovered there was an accidental discharge, but it was an ongoing discharge because somehow some sewer main or some sewer discharge, wastewater discharge, accidentally got sort of plumbed into an outfall into the Truckee River and just kept on going until someone wondered what was going on, and it was never apparently reported. And so, and there weren't any requirements at the time. So this just makes sure that if and when there's a spill and someone identifies it or is aware of it, it needs to be reported to, the Nevada Division of Water Resources, to any tribe, to other local governmental entities. So again, I don't know that this necessarily has a lot of impact to CNRWA or member counties, but this was something that Senator Hansen brought in and was approved. Now, so 6 out of 6 bills, 6 water bills, after all 120 days. I'm going to run through just a couple of bills that had hearings that we might see something on next session, and to keep sort of an eye on. On the Senate side, AB 109, this is something that this board supported, and that is basically requiring all appropriations or applications for appropriations of water to have to go through the Division of Water Resources for permitting, including non-consumptive uses. So today, if you have a non-consumptive water right, that could be a closed geothermal loop. One day it could be a closed brine lithium extraction loop. You're not required to follow the same rules as any other applicant for a water right, and so this was a bill to require that. And there was a lot of support, and again, this organization supported. We added CNRWA to a letter with other organizations to support this bill. Did not get a hearing. Apparently opposed by geothermal industry and maybe others. So I don't know that this issue is going to go away, and I suspect that we may see this again in the next session, or at least some discussion about this going forward. The other bill, let's see, the other 2 bills are kind of similar, and those are AB 9 and AB 134 dealing with water conservation. There was a lot of discussion, and I think, a lot of merit in having discussion about the use it or lose it doctrine and how we work within that, and nobody's talking about doing away with that, but the ability to conserve water under the requirement to put your water to beneficial use continuously, or at least during a 5-year period. And so there were attempts through AB 134 and AB 9 to do just that. AB 134 was a little bit more than I think the committee wanted to deal with, and I know that wasn't a unanimous vote out of the...
This one was confusing to me because it authorized the holder of a perfected water right to file a water conservation plan. It authorized them, if they wanted to file a water conservation plan right now, couldn't they just do it? Why do they have to be authorized to submit something?
They could do it, but then they wouldn't necessarily be able to retain that right.
Oh, okay.
They didn't utilize it for 5 years.
So authorizing them to file a water resource plan guarantees they'll be able to keep the perfected right?
Under this proposal, it would have.
Oh, that's the part, okay.
Yeah, but it was a little bit too much for, at least for for the discussion for this session. So that bill never got heard. However, what the working group did do was try to provide some conservation measures and include them in AB 09, which is an amendment to existing law which allows an agricultural water right holder to temporarily convert their water right for 3 years for wildlife purposes.
Oh, okay.
AB 9 would have allowed it to be extended for 10 years. And that seemed too long. Sort of folks were, galvanized around maybe five years, and put some sideboards in there so that it couldn't be used as an opportunity for people to speculate or park their water rights, and sort of get away from having to show beneficial use. So in other words, be able to do it for 5 years, but again, the same principle. You wouldn't necessarily forfeit your water right as long as you had approval from the state engineer to do so, and it was done under some sort of recognized or official conservation program, like an NRCS conservation program or another legitimate conservation program. I think this group supported that, and it seemed like a kind of a good first step into water conservation that way. But again, got a hearing, but was not. In fact, it was amended out of Ways and Means, and went to. It was amended and due passed out of Assembly Natural Resources, but went to Ways and Means because the state Division of Water Resources put a fiscal note on it.
That's where bills go to die.
Yep, that's where it went to die. So, don't know. We need to have some follow-up conversations with the Division of Water Resources on that one.
Can I ask you a question about SB 143?
Oh,
I rolled my eyes at this one too, because it required NDEP to conduct an interim study on artificial turf and synthetic grass. We can do that right here in 30 seconds. Yes, that's a great water conservation.
Well, I think it was the types of there apparently now there are different types of artificial and synthetic grass. So I think it's a little bit more than just whether or not that's a conservation.
So what?
Yeah, it was not moved.
Yeah.
So the other bill, let's see. So the other bill I want to talk about is AB 363. This is our third attempt at getting authorization or changing the
Water boards.
The local groundwater boards are appointed and their duties, and just can't get the Division of Water Resources or their state engineer to agree to this. And we thought we had some.
Is there a lot of support for it outside the legislature?
There's quite a bit of support. It did pass unanimously out of the Assembly Natural Resources Committee. I presented this bill, got voted out, and referred to Ways and Means because, again, the Division of Water Resources put a fiscal note on it, even though we amended the bill to make this optional or discretionary on the part of the state engineer. In other words, if a county wanted to create a local groundwater board and applied or asked the state engineer to appoint one, the state engineer doesn't have to. So even with that amendment, the division did not remove their fiscal note, which is just the way it goes. But
And it would just be enabling legislation.
It was enabling legislation, but in any event. So that bill went to Ways and Means, and we knew that, with the fiscal note on it, wasn't going to go anywhere. So AB 485, and by the way, AB 363, this bill, AB 104 and SB 36, the two groundwater board bills, AB 134 and AB, or an AB 9, the water conservation bills were all bills that were recommended by the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources. So we had the support of that interim committee behind those bills. So anyway, back to 485. That was another CNRWA/HRBWA recommended bill to deal with groundwater basin assessments, which has been sort of a problem for the last
years.
several years because there's no cap on those basin assessments. There's no,
The money was spent inappropriately.
well, arguably,
Yes.
it hasn't been used the way we believe it should be used, or,
Right.
And then, not having as much information about how that money is budgeted and spent. And last year, we thought we had agreement with the state engineer, and I thought we did, but the bill just didn't make it out again because of fiscal note. We did get it fixed in the budget, so there was no longer the use of the basin funds for purposes that we thought it shouldn't be used for. So the budget piece has been fixed through the budget process. But we're still concerned about all of this going forward. What happened, though, is that bill got combined with a request for $1 million appropriation to the Department of Conservation, Natural Resources, Division of Water Resources for digitizing their records. As we got close to the end of the session, I asked for 485 to be, for 485 to just include the basin assessments. The Division of Water Resources agreed to take out their request for an appropriation. Nature Conservancy, I know, supported that request for appropriation. They agreed to that as well, so we would have had a standalone bill, AB 485, to deal just with the basin assessments. We ran out of time to get that bill heard. Then I tried to get AB 363 amended to remove the groundwater boards piece and insert instead this basin assessment piece, which we had support for, but same thing, we just ran out of session, couldn't get that bill heard in Assembly Ways and Means, even though, and by the way, I will say that the Division of Water Resources came to an agreement with us on the basin assessment bill. So I guess, if nothing else, going forward, I think we have a pretty good foundation for getting something approved and next session. Some ability to bring something forward next session. And I think more importantly, there's recognition that the division, I think, needs to do a little bit better job in putting more information out there about how these funds are being used. So that's that. Another bill I just want to mention, and I think this is probably the last one. There are a bunch of bills here that never even got a hearing, and one bill that did get a hearing that generated a lot of interest, and it's not on here, and I apologize, I somehow got dropped off, is AB 419. This was brought by Assemblymember DeLong, who represents South Washoe County. He's I think a geologist, or was a geologist during his career. This is a bill that we had been hearing about in the interim, being worked on by others outside of the working group that I worked with, having to do with all of the state engineers' processes. There were a number of things in there about how long it takes to get decisions, even on routine applications.
Years.
The fact that the Division of Water Resources is not subject to the Administrative Procedures Act, so they don't have to hold hearings or do regulations in accordance with the Administrative Procedures Act. And probably the other thing, and one of the more important provisions, I thought, or in speaking with other folks, had to do with the fact that the state engineer isn't necessarily bound by their prior decisions. And we wanted to make sure that, and a lot of other folks did, that if the state engineer appears to set a precedent by making a decision that in another situation if they don't follow the same precedent, they have to at least explain why not. Why they're not. And so that was all embodied in this bill. It was very lengthy, complex, covered a lot of topics, and had very little support, only because there was so much in there that folks couldn't sort of swallow it whole. I testified in opposition, but talked about some of these specific pieces that we thought were worth taking a look at. Of course, you know, I coordinated all that or communicated that to the bill sponsor, Mr. DeLong. The bill was heard, and then there was an attempt to try to resurrect the bill and amend it to include just a couple of things that, again, did not have a fiscal note, because the state put a huge fiscal note on there that, because it would have required them to do extra things like agree to hold meetings prior to the submittal of an application, to intermediate sort of decisions, and process things within certain timeframes. So this bill was not moved out of the assembly. Again, this is another topic of discussion. And the other thing I would say is myself, along with others, including, I think, Assemblymember DeLong and others who presented, there was interest in having us present all of this information to
Us being CNRWA.
CNRWA, NHRBWA, me personally.
Yeah.
Presenting all of these bills in a way that highlights what the issues are that we're concerned about with the Division of Water Resources, primarily with a lack of staffing and resources and the data and the science to effectively manage Nevada's water resources, quite frankly. So in my presentation, especially on AB 363, and again, I think Assemblymember DeLong highlighted this as well in his presentation, I pointed out why it was important for there to be local input through these groundwater boards, because the Division of Water Resources doesn't have the staffing or resources to go out and do this in each individual basin that has a declining groundwater level or is under an order. And so spent a lot of time doing that. The end result was that the Division of Water Resources did not get an increase in staffing or funding. They were able to continue, I think, with $1 million in ARPA funds to do some additional basin studies, but the problem persists, and there is a problem. When you can't process a routine application, you know, within a year or 2 years, that's a problem. And I'm not the only one that is hearing this. There were plenty of people that were complaining about.
Well, did they have any reasonable explanation for that? It's just.
They don't have the.
They don't have the manpower.
They don't have the manpower or the funding. So that was part, I guess my what I'm trying to tell you is that part of my mission here, if you will, and sort of interest in presenting these bills was to highlight why we think it's important to have more local input on these bills. I didn't necessarily make the same case for AB 485, but that's something that I know Assemblymember DeLong mentioned, and that was really the impetus for having that bill in the first place, is trying to get the state engineer to act on a lot of these decisions. So
Yeah.
anyway, I think that's about it. It's pretty lengthy. Again, we had a lot of help. It was a good group. Again, in the session, we met regularly, especially on AB 104 and SB 36, the water rights retirement piece. A lot of interest, a lot of support. I don't know if Alex or Laurel want to make any comments, but
Alex is shaking his head. Alex says,
I'll
don't
just
don't
say
sell past
that
the
I think
sale.
that Jeff did an excellent job. I was focused just on groundwater rights retirement, but Jeff was working on a lot of stuff. And
He was everywhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with Alex's support, so thank you guys.
Yes. Good job, everybody.
Yeah, and I thank you very much. It was, a lot of help. I would also mention, you had approved a contract with Debbie Leonard.
Yep.
To work with us. And I we had conversations about a lot of these bills. She was very helpful in analyzing and making some recommendations. Oh, one other bill, now that I mentioned Debbie's name because she helped on this. I don't know why this didn't show up. Somehow some of these things didn't get.
While he's looking for that, did you have something you wanted to say, Alex? You grabbed a mic, so.
No, I didn't really have anything to say other than, thanks for letting me be a part of the team. I
Oh,
love the Central
we
Nevada
forced
Regional
you.
Water Authority. It's a great
We offered
organization.
you a contract and made you sign it.
Made me
Thank you.
sign it, yes.
One other bill that is definitely not going away, and we will see next session, is Senate Bill 31. This was a bill that was brought by the Division of Water Resources for the purpose of avoiding a lawsuit by the federal government.
Good luck.
And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are aware that there is a 2026 deadline, 2027 deadline, December 31st, 2027, for anyone with a vested claim to file by that time. After that, you can no longer file a vested claim for a water right in the state of Nevada. Apparently, the federal government doesn't believe that they're subject to that requirement. The Division of Water Resources is very concerned because there was a lawsuit filed by, I don't know if it was a BLM or some federal agency in Oregon. It was in the Harney Basin or Klamath Basin, where there was a similar deadline, and federal government sued the state of Oregon, and they apparently won. It was 20 years ago, and maybe some different circumstances, and it may have been surface right, I don't remember. But in any event, that was the testimony or the justification for the division bringing this bill. Well, as you can imagine, there were a lot of upset people about why is it that I, as an individual, have to file my claim by 2027, but the federal government doesn't have to. And we tried to offer, and I know Eureka County also tried to offer an amendment to sort of work around that and try to level the playing field a little bit more. But at the end of the day, really what the federal government's lawsuit was about, as I understand, is not that they're saying they aren't subject to having to file a vested claim. What they sued over was they're not going to file for a vested claim until there's an actual adjudication process that takes place. And so apparently their view, at least in the case of Oregon, and now with in Nevada in the 2027 deadline, is this isn't an adjudication. This is just an artificial deadline, which it is to some extent, because we wanted to have an idea of how much is out there in terms of anticipated vested claims, so we can figure out how to start the adjudication process. So no, it's not an official adjudication process, but when an official adjudication process is started with, what do they call it, the notice of determination, hearing for determination order, then they would in fact be subject to that requirement and have to participate in that. So for some folks, it was like, why are we even doing this? Nothing's going to happen between now and 2027. Let's sort of take a pause here and figure out what we can do. Others believe, oh, we absolutely have to do this or else we're going to get sued. The bill was voted out of the Senate, I think on partisan lines, 15-6. Was not moved out of the Assembly. So this will, in some shape or form, come back in 2027, right? Yeah, I'll have to. So, anyway.
Okay,
Madam
Jeff?
Chair, Madam
Can
Chair,
we-
Jeff, this is Chris Mahanic.
Yeah, quickly, because I want to get us out of here before 1 o'clock. Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as Jeff mentioned, I was part of this working group that worked on AB 104 and SB 36. And Jeff, I haven't had a chance to visit with you about this yet, but I just thought I would toss it out. You're aware of the paper Justin Huntington presented at NWRA on water right buyback program that you and others administered, and Justin's finding, I think, was about half of that water that was retired was paper water, not wet water. And I guess just thinking about going forward in the future, what we could do differently to achieve a better result. And one thought that just popped into my head is perhaps compensation of buying the amount of water that's actually wet or being used and not the full paper water rights. I don't know if you've had a chance to digest or think about that, but in my mind, you know, when taxpayer dollars are being spent and half of that roughly is paper water that has no benefit to the basin, to me, that's a little concerning.
Well, yeah, good comment, Chris. That topic has come up quite a bit, and I'll just make a couple of quick comments about it. One is, I pointed out to Justin that some of that data was inaccurate. It was based on what was originally approved or originally applied for our full list. So I sent him updated information on pumpage data that he did not have. So he's going to be updating those. I don't know if it's going to move it, the percentage that much, but so number one, the data set needs to be updated. Number two, you know, remember too that, yeah, there's no immediate benefit by retiring water that hasn't been pumped, but it does prevent the hole from getting bigger, right? The deficit from getting bigger. And so the discussions have been around sort of valuing the water based on what has been pumped versus not pumped, because there's going to be some value to even a paper water right if it's a valid water right. And so we'll have those discussions. Laurel and I have been talking about when we're going to start to get together. But I do agree that the valuation piece, particularly as it relates to non-pumped water, is going to be an important consideration. And lastly, remember, we added the condition that the water rights that are retired have to be certificated rights. So at least there's, you know, some sort of higher level of assurance that water has actually been pumped. In fact, when we looked at the certificated rights versus the permitted rights that we retired, that was actually the case. That was absolutely the case. And while we didn't retire a lot of permitted rights, especially not in Diamond Valley, you know, we could certainly look at valuing the non-pumped rights at a lower value. So all those discussions will take place.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just one thought on the certificated stuff. There's a fair amount of that potentially could be subject to forfeiture. Yep. So just because it is certificated doesn't mean that it's being used.
Totally agree. And maybe that's, you know, that's another discussion that we need to, I mean, look, Chris, you and I both know this, that this program doesn't work on its own. It's got to have a stick behind it along with the carrot. And so we have to rely on the state to use the stick, right?
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. We're going to move to item number 12. This is a discussion and possible action regarding water right applications filed with the Nevada State Engineer. All of those are in your backup. Jeff has highlighted ones that he thinks are relevant. So Jeff, we're going to turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I went through applications back to March, and that goes back a long ways, and you'll see that a lot of these applications are for 2 acre feet in Basin 162, which is the Pahrump Basin. Those are all relinquishments. Almost all of them are relinquishments. And I did not really see anything in here that
Nothing grabbed you, huh?
Concerned me. I did notice, so there were a couple in Mineral County. I did talk to Mr. Nixon about those and the applicants, the Tiptons, about what they were doing, since we haven't really focused on Mineral Counties. until they join, but I don't know that there's anything that we need to be concerned about there. They're, for the most part, change applications, and in one case, a small mining and milling operation for, 2 acre feet. And then, let's see. There are 2 applications in Esmeralda County that I highlighted in Lida Valley for Point Mining and Milling Desert Sun Investments, Inc. It caught my eye, so I guess I'll ask the Esmeralda County folks if they have any knowledge or concern about those.
We're on our way to the state after this meeting to deliver our protest in person.
And that, also, in that protest, there's other pieces of the puzzle, and it kind of revolves around the little ghost town of Gold Point. So that's kind of something that's percolated up to, I think some action is probably going to happen soon. And I don't know where it's going, but yes, that's something that is of concern.
Commissioner Perez, what's the status of your protest against Ioneer? Has that been resolved? Is it ongoing?
Madam Chair, if you wouldn't-
Should I just
It's ongoing.
stop that right
and-
now?
And it is moving. It is
Okay.
moving.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was prepared to talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
But I wanna, if we can just kind of get through
Absolutely.
these first.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, is this something you wanted CNRWA to consider supporting or
I
protesting?
think,
We didn't file on the other one, the original one on the,
yeah, I possibly, yeah, I think we could have a conversation about that.
I think the RFA date is July 5th. So there's time. The 5th.
Yeah.
Do you want me to run I live in Carson City, I'm going back there this afternoon. If you want, I can.
Well, we want to kind of look through some other files.
Okay,
too,
okay.
so that-
I mean.
We'll just segue right into the rest of Jeff's report.
Okay, well, I guess if you want us to protest these 2 applications, the board has to take action on that.
Yeah,
So I
you need to
guess-
let us know
I mean,
after you look at other files.
well,
What,
we'd have to do it at this meeting because they have,
Oh,
we'd have to
okay.
file by July 5th.
Oh,
so like I said in the beginning of this conversation, this is one of the probably last pieces of a lot of puzzle pieces that are kind of coming together. And I would almost say, would we want support? I would say absolutely yes, because the whole picture we would like to support. We don't have the time to kind of tell you what's going on there. I would love to. But that's something, like I said, it's been about a year process of what's been going on in Gold Point. It started July 2nd when our water was shut off, and we've been hauling water. And it's just kind of evolving into this thing that I've been real patient with, and we've got good people on it. So I think I would think if you wanted to support us, I don't know how we do that such last minute at this point. But
I'm wondering because I know this is one piece of the puzzle, and I'm wondering how effective a protest from us would be since we didn't file on the previous applications, so.
Yeah, I think we could probably go without it. But it is a big ball of string or whatever you want to call it, but this is such a small piece, I don't know that how effective it will be, so maybe we don't need to do that.
Okay. Aside from that, Madam Chair, I did want to talk briefly about Ioneer, and that is not a small project. Oh, and by the way, I think this has to do with the applications filed back in, well, this is the same application, AB 94312. Okay. The Ioneer application. So we've been working pretty closely with Commissioner Perez and Chris and Ioneer and Dave Berger. And we sat down with the Ioneer folks, I want to say it's been a month ago, and we sat down with attorneys, hydrogeologists, all kinds of people, and went over this. I had to leave the meeting early because of a bill that I was involved with. So I don't know, and then we had a sort of a quick sidebar, so I'm not sure how that ended up.
If I could speak to that.
Please do.
It was kind of a confidential meeting, but I think it would be safe to say that both sides, of the table were kind of amicable to each other. And I think it just kind of probably publicly can say, I could see that it could work itself out without getting into a bunch of details. So that was, that's how I left the meeting, feeling that. And I think the consensus was all the way around.
And just real quickly, the issue really was about, it's a series of change applications initially for White Mountain Ranches, which is probably some of the more senior rights in Fish Lake Valley. And the concern was, well, even though they're existing rights and you're just changing the place of use and manner of use, what's the real pumping going to be relative to what it was in the past? Because that basin is right at being overpumped, if not already overpumped. And then the requirement for some sort of 3M plan, and then going forward, additional water rights that are going to be needed for that mine, particularly closer to where there might be some springs. And so, again, we've had very cordial and honest and open conversations, at least from my standpoint, with the Ioneer folks. And so I'm glad to hear that at least after that meeting, there was some, optimism.
I'm a very optimistic person, so I see that everywhere, but I truly felt that the consensus around the whole table was the same.
And by the way, just to make sure that everybody understands, we support the county. I mean, we're going to do, if the county says it's good, we're good too. If there are some things that we see that maybe the county, we want to make sure the county is aware of, we'll do that too. But ultimately, whether or not to drop the protest is going to be the county's decision. And if the county drops its protest, we will drop our protest.
So, Madam Chair, could I dovetail off of something on this subject that would be part of my report, or probably all of it, if you would let me?
That is perfectly fine.
So, talking about Fish Lake Valley and the water, is Esmeralda County.
Well, let me ask you, just so that we are complying with the open meeting law, is it related specifically to the information that's in your backup, the water rights filings?
Maybe I'll wait for my report then.
Okay, please.
All right, Madam Chair, the only other thing I wanted to mention is, you may recall, about a year and a half ago, CNRWA filed a protest to an application for an interbasin project and appropriation of water in southern Utah. It's called the Pine Valley Water Project, over concerns about the potential impacts that this proposed 66-mile pipeline project proposed by the Central Iron County Water Conservation District for some 15,000 acre feet would have on adjacent basins in Nevada, including, I think, Snake and Hamlin Valleys. There was a lot of opposition to this proposed project, and the BLM, I think the project applicant asked the BLM to put the NEPA process on hold. As a result, I guess there's some news now that they're sort of restarting the process, and so our protest is on file with the Utah Division of Water Resources, and we'll just keep monitoring that situation. And I think that's it on the item.
All right, thank you. Jeff, I don't know if after all of this you have anything to report, but we'll move to item 13, which is your report to the CNRWA board.
Let's see here. I thought I had something here. Going off. Sorry. Just a couple of quick things, I guess, on the federal side. You may have read that there's an executive order, I guess, to streamline or expedite the NEPA process for projects of sort of national, energy projects of national significance or nation security, and that would include, I think, 3 projects in Nevada that are geothermal projects that are going through the permitting process right now, including Diamond Flat Geothermal Project near Fallon, McGinnis Hills Geothermal Project in Lander County, and the Pinto Geothermal Project in Humboldt County and near Denio. I think they're all ORMAT projects maybe. And anyway, this would expedite the NEPA process to 14 days.
That's huge.
That's huge.
That is huge.
And then the other thing is, I know that Commissioner Strickland was interested in this. The latest initiative to sell, transfer public lands in the West. The latest is Senator Mike Lee of Utah. He's the chair of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and this would be an amendment in the reconciliation bill, or the one big beautiful bill, to basically sell about 2.5–3 million acres of public lands, including Forest Service land and BLM land in 11 western states, including Nevada. And this could include it's pretty much wide open, except that it would exclude, national parks, wilderness study areas, wildlife habitats, things of that nature. And while I can tell you that in Nevada, especially beginning with the Sagebrush Rebellion and my work at NACO, there's been a lot of interest in figuring out how the state of Nevada and counties could get additional federal lands for development and economic development and community infrastructure. And there are public lands bills that have been hanging around for decades for some counties, and it's been frustrating. This bill is taking a bazooka to a process that probably is, hasn't really been successful under the surgical, more strategic process, but it's kind of like the extreme end. And so, as you can imagine, there's a lot of opposition. The thing that caught my eye about this bill, or the couple things, are one, the sales would not necessarily be requested by counties or communities, which is an issue because it's really the counties that are going to end up having to deal with what happens if these parcels are sold and want to be developed. Two, the funding or the proceeds will not go to the counties or the state. And three, it doesn't necessarily respect or include any mitigation or compensation for existing valid rights like grazing allotments. Those three things alone are of significant concern, even for those who really want to see more federal lands transferred to the state or even sold. So I don't know where this is going to end up, but I just, having been in this, process and on this topic for, many, many years, the current situation is not working very well because it's almost impossible to get public lands transferred to the state or counties. On the other hand, you've got this, which is like really very broad and sweeping and has a lot of potential negative implications. So, not to mention the fact that once a process like this starts, then you got to figure out how you're actually going to develop these parcels And if you don't have the local governments involved, where's the water going to come from and all the other infrastructure? So that's my commentary.
And Commissioner Strickland? No, she's up, she's there.
Muted.
She's muted, yeah. All right.
I'm unmuted finally.
Oh,
Hey.
there you are. Yes,
There, yeah.
and I know you sent an email to Jeff and to me, and I responded to you, but I have since come to find out what your concern is, and it relates to Nye County's pending lands bill, and you were afraid that this action was going to submarine or interfere with your lands bill. Is that correct?
Yes, and you know that lands bill's been being worked on since 2007, and it's our cemeteries, it's our shooting ranges, it's the
Yeah.
patent on our fairgrounds, it's so many things that would be affected. And we want to be a member of SNPLMA, and yeah, I can go on and on. Yes, Chair, it would be devastating if they actually
Yeah.
sold off 33 million acres in Nevada, the driest state in the union. How would you develop these properties? So it's just flat crazy.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank
Jeff,
you.
is that it? Item 14 is board member and executive director. Well, we just heard the executive director comments. Board members, I will open the floor up to you. Do you have any comments for the record? Jeff, item 15, you want to tell us when our next meeting is?
Well, let's see. July, August, September. It would be, based on the 3-month cycle, would be sometime in mid-September, perhaps even early October, I would think. And I don't have NACO's meeting schedule here, so I can't tell you what their meeting is in September, October. I can tell you the Humboldt River Basin Water Authority is going to be meeting September 12th. So I should have checked that ahead of time. And while you're looking for that, Madam Chair, I just want to also mention that. Go ahead.
What am I looking for?
Oh, I thought you were looking for.
No.
NACO's meetings?
No, I don't know when they are.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Aren't they at the
I'll
end of the
bet
month?
Deborah knows. She's their, Commissioner Strickland, she's their board's representative.
An alternate. Yeah, I'm the alternate. I do not have it marked down either, Jeff or Chair.
September, Miles, get over the record, September 23rd is when.
September
NACO
23rd is the
Okay,
NACO.
and do you happen to know about October, not Miles?
October's meeting.
Oh, they're meeting, wait, NACO's meeting September 23rd? Oh, that's probably during the conference, that's why. Well, then you could do the 19th, 26th, or the 3rd. Really? Wait, I can't do the 19th, I'm sorry. The 26th or the 3rd. My apologies. How's the 3rd look for October 3rd? Subject to
Good on my
availability.
end.
Yeah? Oh, yeah, wait a second. I forgot about that.
Deer season.
When is,
Yeah, that might be a question for
I thought that
everybody.
was the
Who drew a
15th.
deer tag this year?
Who got the moose tag?
Who got a moose tag?
Who got the moose tag?
I'm going with a party on the early, is it late season?
Somebody from Vegas drew one.
Really?
I think the 3rd is okay. I think rifles on the 15th, right?
Only in Nevada.
Anybody?
Let's go with October 3rd.
Let's go with October 3rd. Great, thank you, Pam. And Madam Chair, 2 things, if I may, just,
Go right ahead.
I forgot to mention.
As long as we're out of here by
We
1.
will be out of here.
Talk quick.
Okay. For those of you who don't recall, CNRWA joined on an amicus brief to support the appeal by the Baker Ranches appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in a case where they had been denied access to their water by the National Park Service. And so I think there are about 13 or 15 other parties to the amicus brief, and then a separate brief that was filed by Farm Bureau and I think Eureka County as well. Not much has happened, as you can imagine. These federal lawsuits, it's just briefs going back and opening briefs going back and forth, and motions for extensions of the time to file these briefs. So there isn't a whole lot to report there. And then before I forget, I just want to again thank Churchill County and Pam Moore and all the Churchill County commissioners and management for allowing us to have our meetings here. It's really a great place to meet.
It's a terrific
It really
place
is.
to meet.
And thanks for Pam, as always, for making sure that everything runs smoothly, because I certainly can't. So thank you.
All right, so we have set our next meeting. Item 16, our last item on the agenda, is our second public comment period. Again, this time is devoted to comments by the general public, and we do not take action on any of those comments until they've been included on a future agenda as an action item. Is there any public comment?
I have something.
Yes.
So, and this is related to what Jeff was just talking about the reconciliation bill. So I just wanted to mention that the Nature Conservancy has some concerns about the public land sales in Nevada, and if people are interested, I brought copies of a letter that was submitted by sportsmen and conservation folks to the Senate, and also we have a handout about public lands that we prepared if people are interested, and we're also interested in talking with folks about.
Yes, we would appreciate those.
So I just wanted to share that, and again, I have also copies of our agrivoltaics paper if anybody wants that.
Okay, thank you, Laurel. Is there any other public comment? Public comment is closed and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.